My ex-husband, who thought I was infertile, left me 15 years ago. When he ran into me and saw my son, he trembled. That chance encounter was just the beginning of a tumultuous journey where old secrets resurface and hidden truths come to light, challenging everything he believed about the past, present, and future. Hey there, folks. I'm Linda, and welcome to Linda's Stories channel. I hope you're all ready for a good tale. So picture this. It's a sunny afternoon, and there's Catherine sitting by herself at a restaurant table by the window. She's gazing outside, enjoying the lovely day, waiting for the waiter to bring her lunch. Little did she know, a surprising encounter was just around the corner. As Catherine headed to the bathroom, she accidentally bumped into a boy walking down the hallway. She said sorry right away, but when she glanced at the man with the boy, she was shocked to see someone from her past. It was Michel, Catherine's ex-husband, whom she hadn't seen in 15 years since they divorced. Feeling a bit surprised by the unexpected meeting, Catherine felt a mix of surprise and discomfort as he came closer. However, she stayed composed and greeted him politely. Michel and Catherine had always dreamed of having children. From the start of their marriage, they tried hard to make that dream come true, but it just didn't happen. Years passed, and they still couldn't conceive. Catherine started to worry that something might be wrong and suggested they see a doctor together to figure it out and maybe try some treatments. But Michel, being stubborn, refused to go. He came from a big family and thought the problem must be with Catherine, considering his own family's fertility history compared to hers, as she was an only child. Using their family backgrounds as evidence, he started blaming her for being infertile, which only made things worse between them. Eventually, their frustrations and misunderstandings grew so much that they ended up getting divorced. Despite the scars from their past, Catherine decided to greet Michel politely, recognizing that time had passed since they last met. However, her warm attitude was met with coldness and disdain from Michel. "Are you alone?" "Still single, I see," he said arrogantly, his eyes reflecting superiority and indifference towards Catherine. With a gesture implying his supposed superiority, he introduced the young man beside him. "This is my son, Austin," he announced proudly, as if it were a personal accomplishment. "He's a real genius, just like my new wife, Sophie," he added, nodding towards a woman at another table, a hint of pride in his voice as he talked about his new family. Catherine was astonished by Michel's arrogance. She had hoped that after so many years, things might have changed between them, but his behavior showed otherwise. It was clear that he was still as proud as ever. However, little did Michel know, something was about to happen that would shake up his entire family's destiny and change the course of his own history forever. As they talked, a tall and caring young boy approached Catherine. Seeing the concern on her face, the boy, with a protective instinct, asked, "Is everything all right, Mom?" Catherine's face lit up at the sight of her son, and she replied warmly, "Yes, everything's fine, my dear. I'm happy you're here. I ran into someone from the past while waiting for you." She gave her son a loving kiss on the cheek, appreciating his care. "I want you to meet my son, Michel," Catherine continued, smiling as she noticed the surprise on Michel's face. "This is Nathan." Michel couldn't conceal his surprise upon discovering that Catherine had a son. His eyes widened, reflecting a whirlwind of thoughts as he realized the boy was already a teenager, about 15 years old. Before Michel could say anything, the waiter arrived with Catherine's lunch, breaking the moment. Taking advantage of the interruption, Catherine excused herself and joined her son, leaving Michel lost in his thoughts. Returning to his table with his son and wife, Michel appeared distant, his mind elsewhere. While Sophie and Austin enjoyed their meals, Michel seemed preoccupied, his thoughts consumed by a single idea. Could Nathan be his son? Was it possible that Catherine was pregnant when they separated and never told him? But why would she keep it a secret? These questions consumed Michel, overshadowing his ability to enjoy the present moment. Before he could find answers, Sophie's voice broke through his thoughts, snapping him back to reality. As days passed, Michel couldn't shake the issue from his mind. He dreaded facing the truth that haunted him. How would Sophie react to learning he had a child from his past marriage? And what about Austin? How would he feel discovering he had an older brother? The idea of confronting Catherine, fearing she might demand financial support, only added to his anxiety. Despite the swirling uncertainties and doubts in his mind, Michel couldn't ignore the overwhelming curiosity pushing him to uncover the truth. How could this be possible? Michel questioned himself relentlessly. He was convinced that Catherine was unable to have children, especially after years of failed attempts to conceive together. Michel's experience with Sophie had been vastly different. A few years after his divorce, he met Sophie, and she soon became pregnant with Austin. Upon hearing the news, they swiftly decided to marry, embarking on a new life together. These contrasting circumstances only deepened Michel's doubts and confusion about the possibility of Nathan being his son. Michel found himself caught in a profound internal struggle. On one side, he yearned for the truth, but on the other, he dreaded the potential upheaval in his life if Nathan turned out to be his son. His pride urged him to maintain the facade of a perfect family with Sophie and Austin, convincing himself that Nathan and Catherine's reappearance would only bring chaos and disruption. Yet, Catherine's persistent silence on the matter intrigued him further. Why would she keep Nathan a secret from him? This mystery intensified his curiosity and deepened his doubts. Meanwhile, Sophie began to notice her husband's distant demeanor. Michel always seemed lost in thought, and it concerned her deeply. Determined to uncover the cause of his distress, she confronted him, ready to face whatever truth lay behind his troubled behavior. Feeling trapped and unable to keep his worries to himself any longer, Michel finally opened up to his wife about his suspicions. Sophie was taken aback by Michel's revelations, her eyes widening in disbelief and apprehension. "Do you think Nathan could be your son?" she asked, her voice betraying surprise and uncertainty. Taking a deep breath, Michel mustered the courage to admit his suspicions. "Yes, I believe it's a possibility," he confessed, his voice tinged with doubt. Concern furrowed Sophie's brow. "But Michel, this could turn our lives upside down. Are you sure it's wise to pursue this truth?" she asked, her apprehension evident in her tone. Michel nodded resolutely. "I have to know, Sophie. If Catherine won't tell me the truth, then I'll arrange for a DNA test," he declared firmly, his decision firm and unwavering. "No, Michel, please don't do this," Sophie pleaded, desperation creeping into her voice. "We shouldn't get mixed up in their lives," she reasoned, attempting to sway her husband. "Let's just leave the past where it belongs and focus on our future." Sophie tried everything to dissuade Michel from pursuing the truth, convinced it was best to leave things in the past. She thought she had convinced him, but Michel remained resolute in his determination to uncover the truth. Against Sophie's wishes, Michel decided to contact Catherine and arrange a meeting, determined to seek answers. Catherine was taken aback when Michel reached out to her after their unexpected encounter at the restaurant. She never expected to hear from him again, recalling his arrogance from their past. Initially hesitant, she declined his invitation. However, Michel's persistence eventually persuaded her to agree, albeit reluctantly. "Catherine, there's something important we need to discuss," Michel began, sounding unsure. "It's been weighing on my mind since our meeting at the restaurant. I've been thinking about it a lot lately, and I need to know the truth," he asserted firmly. "What's this about? What do you mean?" Catherine asked, puzzled. "You know exactly what I'm referring to," Michel snapped back. "I'm talking about Nathan. If he's my son, I deserve to know," he declared emphatically. "Oh, so that's why you were so surprised at the restaurant," Catherine chuckled, putting the pieces together. "What's so funny?" Michel demanded. "I deserve to know the truth." "No, Nathan isn't yours," Catherine affirmed, frustrated by Michel's insistence. Unsatisfied, Michel pressed on. "Then whose son is he?" he demanded. "You, a single mom with a 15-year-old son. He has to be mine. I just don't understand how that's possible. You were infertile." "You always jump to conclusions," Catherine shot back, annoyed by Michel's accusations. "Nathan isn't yours. I've already told you he's Gregory's son, my husband's." Michel was taken aback, and Catherine clarified. "Nathan isn't 15. He's tall like my husband, but he's actually just about to turn 14. There's no way he could be your son," Catherine asserted. "After our divorce, I went to see a doctor to figure out why I couldn't conceive and maybe explore treatment options," she explained. "But the doctor told me there was nothing wrong. I was perfectly healthy and capable of getting pregnant. And that's exactly what happened. Once Gregory and I got married, I became pregnant with Nathan, and later on, we had 2 more sons, Evan, who is 10, and Theo, who is 7. After the confrontation with Catherine and the revelation that Nathan wasn't his son, Michel felt deeply intrigued and disturbed. Catherine's words made him question everything he believed about his fertility and his relationship with Sophie. Angry and confused, Michel tried to make sense of it all. He couldn't understand how, coming from a large family, he only had one child with Sophie, while Catherine, whom he thought was infertile, had 3 children with her husband. Ultimately, Michel decided to take Catherine's advice and see a doctor. Sophie, thinking she had convinced him to move on from the past, had no idea what Michel was up to, and he couldn't anticipate what he would discover. The medical tests revealed a truth that rocked Michel to his core. He was sterile. This revelation triggered a flood of questions about his marriage to Sophie. How could he have fathered a child with her if he was sterile? This newfound knowledge cast doubt on the very foundation of their relationship. Michel spent a considerable amount of time lost in thought, contemplating the significance of this revelation and its implications for his life and his marriage to Sophie. He was faced with the daunting task of redefining his identity and role as a husband and father. Amidst the turmoil of this painful discovery, when he confronted Sophie, Michel was devastated to learn the truth about Austine. She admitted that during the early stages of their relationship, she had a brief affair with another man, resulting in her pregnancy with Austine. The revelation left Michel utterly shattered, feeling as though his entire life had crumbled around him. His pride and confidence in his fertility had blinded him to the truth for so long. Now he was confronted with a new reality that shook the very core of his beliefs about his marriage and his role as a father. Michel had to come to terms with this newfound truth. He found himself faced with the daunting task of rebuilding his relationship with Sophie on a foundation of shattered trust. Moreover, he grappled with the emotional challenge of reconciling his feelings towards Austine, knowing he wasn't his biological son but still loving him as his own child. This revelation marked a profound turning point for Michel, but he understood the necessity of forging ahead and reconstructing his life upon this newfound truth. This narrative underscores the vital role truth plays in fostering healthy and enduring relationships. Honesty, both with oneself and with others, serves as a cornerstone for nurturing mutual trust and respect. Moreover, the story serves as a poignant reminder of the importance of confronting our own biases and egos, which can obscure our perception of reality and hinder our ability to truly see those around us. Have you ever experienced a moment where the revelation of truth completely altered your perspective on something or someone in your life? If you found this story engaging, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Feel free to leave a comment with a number from 1 to 5 to indicate your level of appreciation for the narrative. Also, check out the video currently displayed on your screen. Until next time.
It's your time to step down, Della. Ron and I are moving in, and it's only fair you find a smaller place, now that you're alone. Marla said with a deceptive sweetness that didn't quite reach her eyes. The words hung in the air like a bitter aftertaste, shattering the illusion of our supposedly happy family gathering. I struggled to maintain my composure, my heart thumping as I glanced at the smug expressions of my stepdaughter and her new husband. Greg's untimely passing had left a void in our lives, and I'd naively hoped we could move forward as a united family. But Marla's announcement made it painfully clear that she had ulterior motives, her eyes glinting with a sense of entitlement that sent a chill down my spine. I appreciate your concern, Marla, I replied, forcing a tight smile. But this is still my home, and I have no intentions of leaving any time soon. Ron cleared his throat, leaning back in his chair with an air of smugness. Well, the way I see it, you're just a temporary guest here. Greg left this place for his blood family, not some stepmom he picked up later in life. My jaw clenched at his disrespectful tone, but I refused to take the bait. Greg's will had been frustratingly ambiguous regarding the house, a loophole I knew Marla would exploit with her cunning manipulations. That's enough, Ron, I said firmly, meeting Marla's gaze with unwavering resolve. I think it's best if you two leave. We'll discuss this another time, preferably with cooler heads. Marla's lips curled into a sneer as she rose from her chair, her eyes narrowing with disdain. Don't think for a second that I'll let this go, Della. This is my rightful inheritance, and I won't let you stand in my way. As they stormed out, the weight of Marla's words sank in, triggering a flood of memories from our past confrontations. She had always been a master manipulator, playing the victim while subtly undermining my relationship with Greg. And now, with him gone, she saw an opportunity to seize control, oblivious to the consequences of her actions. Steeling my resolve, I knew I couldn't let her win this battle. Marla had underestimated my determination, and I was prepared to do whatever it took to protect what was rightfully mine and teach her a lesson she wouldn't soon forget. With trembling hands, I poured myself a glass of wine, seeking solace in the familiar warmth of the burgundy liquid. Marla's audacious announcement had left me reeling, but I refused to let her see the depths of my distress. As I settled into the plush chair in my home office, the weight of the evening's events came crashing down. Marla had always been a thorn in my side, her entitled attitude a constant source of friction within our family. But this brazen attempt to seize control of the home Greg and I had built together was a new low, even for her. I took a sip of wine, grimacing at the bitter aftertaste that mirrored the emotions swirling within me. Anger, betrayal, and a burning desire for retribution all vied for dominance, fueling a determination I hadn't felt in years. Memories of past confrontations with Marla flooded my mind, each one a stark reminder of her manipulative nature. The way she had twisted situations to paint herself as the victim, turning Greg against me with her crocodile tears and false accusations. It was a pattern I had foolishly ignored for too long, blinded by my love for Greg and the hope that she would eventually mature. But now, with Greg gone, Marla saw an opportunity to strike, her true colors shining through like a venomous snake shedding its skin. And I, the naive stepmom, had unwittingly played right into her hands by underestimating her ruthlessness. "Not this time, Marla," I muttered, downing the rest of my wine with a newfound resolve. "You've made your move, but I'm far from checkmate." I knew Marla's financial irresponsibility was her Achilles heel, a weakness I could exploit to turn the tables on her machinations. Greg's will might have been ambiguous about the house, but I had the foresight to protect myself by ensuring any transfer of ownership would be contingent on meeting specific legal conditions. Conditions I knew Marla would struggle to uphold. A sly smile crept across my face as a plan began to take shape. Marla wanted the house? Fine. I would let her have it, but on my terms. And when the time was right, when her reckless spending and entitlement caught up with her, I would be there to watch her crumble under the weight of her own hubris. Revenge, they say, is a dish best served cold. And I intended to make Marla's downfall a deliciously chilling affair, one that would teach her the harsh lessons of karma and consequence, lessons she should have learned long ago. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the scent of determination as I sat across from my lawyer, Sarah, at our favorite local cafe. Her sharp features and no-nonsense demeanor had always put me at ease, a reassuring presence in the face of Marla's escalating antics. "So, let me get this straight," Sarah said, leaning back in her chair and studying me intently. "Marla not only demanded you vacate the house, but her husband had the audacity to imply you're just a temporary guest?" I nodded, my jaw clenching at the memory of Ron's disrespectful words. "That's the gist of it. Marla's made it abundantly clear that she intends to take over the property, regardless of my wishes or the legal implications." Sarah shook her head, a humorless chuckle escaping her lips. "Unbelievable. That girl has always been a piece of work, but this takes the cake." "You're telling me," I agreed, taking a sip of my coffee. "But I'm not about to let her get away with it. I want to explore every legal avenue available to prevent her from pulling this stunt." Sarah's eyes gleamed with a mixture of admiration and determination. "I'm glad to hear it, Della. Frankly, you've been too lenient with her in the past. It's time we fight fire with fire." As Sarah outlined my options, a plan began to take shape. While Greg's will had been frustratingly vague, there were still loopholes I could exploit to maintain control of the situation. If Marla wanted the house so badly, I would let her have it, but on my terms. "Here's what we'll do," I said, leaning forward with newfound conviction. "We'll draft a contract stating that ownership of the property will be transferred to Marla, but with specific conditions tied to the mortgage payments and upkeep costs." Sarah nodded, a sly grin spreading across her face. "I like where you're going with this. We'll include clauses that will be difficult for her to maintain, given her financial irresponsibility." "Exactly," I replied, a sense of satisfaction washing over me. and when she inevitably fails to meet those conditions, the house will revert back to my control, along with any legal repercussions for her breach of contract. Sarah let out a low whistle, her admiration evident. Della, you're a force to be reckoned with. I can't wait to see the look on Marla's face when she realizes she's walked straight into your trap. As we hammered out the details, a sense of vindication surged through me. Marla had always underestimated my resilience, mistaking my kindness for weakness. But now, she would learn the hard way that crossing me had severe consequences. Let the games begin, I muttered, a wry smile playing on my lips as I imagined the look of shock and outrage on Marla's face when she realized the true extent of my machinations. The air was thick with tension as I watched the movers carry box after box into the house I had called home for so many years. Marla's smug expression was a stark contrast to the sadness etched onto her husband Ron's face, a hint of guilt flickering in his eyes as our gazes met. "I hope you're happy now," I said, unable to mask the bitterness in my tone. "You've finally gotten what you wanted." Marla scoffed, tossing her hair over her shoulder with a dismissive flick of her wrist. "Don't be so melodramatic, Della. This is just the natural order of things. You had your time, and now it's ours." I bit back a scathing retort, reminding myself to play along, for now. Sarah's careful legal maneuvering had ensured that Marla's so-called victory would be short-lived, and I intended to savor every moment of her impending downfall. As the last of my belongings were loaded into the moving van, I took one final glance around the house, committing every detail to memory. The walls that had witnessed countless family gatherings, the kitchen where I had prepared countless meals, the living room where Greg and I had spent countless evenings cuddled together on the couch. A pang of sadness tugged at my heart, but I quickly pushed it aside, steeling my resolve. This was no longer my home. It was merely a battlefield, and I was a seasoned warrior, ready to wage war against Marla's hubris. "Well, I suppose this is it," I said, turning to face my stepdaughter with a practiced calm. "The house is all yours, Marla. I hope you'll take good care of it." Marla's lips curved into a smug smirk, her eyes glinting with a sense of triumph that made my blood boil. "Don't worry, Della. I'll make sure to keep everything in tip-top shape. After all, this is my rightful inheritance." I forced a tight smile, resisting the urge to wipe that smug grin off her face. "We'll see about that," I muttered under my breath as I climbed into the waiting van. As we pulled away from the house, I couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation bubbling within me. Unbeknownst to Marla, I had already set the wheels in motion for her inevitable downfall. A quick call to a trusted real estate agent had ensured that the property would be closely monitored, with any potential issues or foreclosure proceedings promptly reported to me. And with the carefully crafted legal conditions Sarah had woven into the transfer agreement, it was only a matter of time before Marla's financial irresponsibility caught up with her. A sly grin spread across my face as I settled into the plush seat of the van, already envisioning the look of shock and dismay on Marla's face when she realized the true extent of my machinations. "Checkmate, my dear," I murmured, watching as the house, and Marla's false sense of victory, disappeared in the rearview mirror. The modest apartment felt like a sanctuary, a haven from the chaos and betrayal that had plagued my life in recent weeks. As I unpacked the last of my belongings, a sense of calm washed over me. A calm that was tempered by a simmering determination to see my plan through to its inevitable conclusion. I had chosen this place strategically, a comfortable yet unassuming abode that would lull Marla into a false sense of complacency. She had always been one to judge based on appearances, and I knew she would revel in the idea of her once formidable stepmother being reduced to such modest living quarters. Little did she know that this was all part of my carefully orchestrated scheme. As I settled onto the plush couch, a wry smile tugged at my lips. Sarah had worked her legal magic, weaving a web of conditions and clauses into the transfer agreement that would prove to be Marla's undoing. It was only a matter of time before her reckless spending habits and financial irresponsibility caught up with her, setting the stage for the ultimate comeuppance. The sound of my phone ringing jolted me from my reverie, and I couldn't help but chuckle as I glanced at the caller ID. It was my trusted real estate agent, Cynthia, the woman tasked with keeping a close eye on the house and any potential issues that might arise. "Hello, Cynthia," I answered, my voice brimming with confidence. "I trust you have some good news for me?" "You know me too well, Della," Cynthia replied, her tone laced with a mixture of amusement and admiration. "It seems your stepdaughter has already started making waves. The bank has been in touch, reminding her about the upcoming loan renewal and the importance of maintaining a spotless credit history." I couldn't help but let out a satisfied chuckle. The loan renewal clause had been a stroke of genius on Sarah's part, a ticking time bomb that would detonate the moment Marla's financial house of cards came crumbling down. "Excellent," I said, leaning back into the couch's plush embrace. "Keep me updated on any developments, won't you, Cynthia? I have a feeling things are about to get very interesting." "You can count on it," Cynthia assured me. "I'll be sure to keep a close eye on the situation and report back any juicy details." As I ended the call, a sense of anticipation coursed through my veins. The trap had been set, and Marla was blissfully unaware of the snare tightening around her. All I had to do now was sit back and wait for her inevitable missteps to trigger the collapse of her ill-gotten gains. With a contented sigh, I reached for the remote control and turned on the television, eager to lose myself in mindless entertainment as the wheels of my revenge continued to turn in the background. "Enjoy your victory while it lasts, Marla," I murmured, a sly grin etching itself onto my features, "because when the dust settles, you'll be the one left picking up the pieces." The sound of shattering glass echoed through the once pristine hallways, punctuated by Marla's shrill screams and Ron's futile attempts to placate her. As I stepped through the front door, the scene that greeted me was one of utter chaos. A stark contrast to the orderly home I had maintained for so many years. "You idiot!" Marla shrieked, her face contorted with rage as she hurled a vase across the room, narrowly missing Ron's head. "How could you let this happen?" Ron cowered like a scolded puppy, his shoulders slumped in defeat. "I'm sorry, babe," he mumbled, his voice trembling with fear. "I thought we had more time to get our finances in order." I cleared my throat, announcing my presence with a calm that belied the inner satisfaction coursing through my veins. "Is everything all right here?" Marla whirled around, her eyes blazing with a mixture of anger and humiliation. "You!" she spat, jabbing an accusatory finger in my direction. "You did this, didn't you? You set us up with those ridiculous loan conditions, knowing we'd never be able to keep up." A wry smile tugged at the corners of my mouth as I took in the scene of Marla's unraveling. The once immaculate living room was a testament to her descent into chaos, with overturned furniture and shattered knickknacks strewn about like casualties on a battlefield. "I have no idea what you're talking about, Marla," I replied, feigning innocence. "This is simply the consequence of your own actions, or should I say, inactions?" Ron's eyes darted between us, a flicker of understanding dawning in their depths. "Babe, maybe she's right," he ventured cautiously. "We've been living way beyond our means, ignoring all the warning signs." Marla's jaw tightened, her nostrils flaring with indignation. "Don't you dare take her side," she hissed, rounding on her husband with a fury that made him flinch. "This is all part of her twisted game. She's been plotting against us from the start." I couldn't help but chuckle at the irony of her words. "You give me far too much credit, Marla," I said, taking a step closer. "The only game being played here is the one you started when you tried to take what wasn't rightfully yours." Realization began to dawn on Marla's face, her eyes widening as the pieces fell into place. The loan renewal clause, the meticulous monitoring of the property's value, the mounting debt that had spiraled out of control, it had all been a carefully orchestrated trap, and she had waltzed right into it. "You knew," she whispered, her voice laced with a mixture of awe and fury. "You knew I'd never be able to keep up with the payments, and you let me take the house anyway." I nodded, savoring the taste of her defeat. "Of course I did, dear. You see, I've learned a thing or two about the consequences of greed and entitlement over the years, lessons that you, unfortunately, have yet to grasp." As Marla sank to the floor, her carefully constructed facade of superiority crumbling around her, I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. The scales of justice had finally been balanced, and the price of her hubris had been paid in full. The air was thick with tension as I surveyed the wreckage of what had once been a pristine living room. Marla sat on the floor, her shoulders slumped in defeat, while Ron hovered nearby, his expression a mixture of guilt and resignation. "Well, well, look at the mess you've made," I said, my voice laced with a mix of triumph and pity. "And to think, this could have all been avoided if you'd just learned to control your entitlement and greed." Marla's head snapped up, her eyes blazing with fury. "Don't you dare lecture me, Della," she spat, her words dripping with venom. "This was all part of your twisted little revenge scheme, wasn't it?" A wry smile tugged at the corners of my mouth as I met her gaze unflinchingly. "Revenge? Now why would I need to seek revenge against my own stepdaughter?" Ron shifted uncomfortably, his gaze darting between us like a spectator at a particularly intense tennis match. Maybe we should all just take a deep breath and... "Shut up, Ron," Marla snarled, cutting him off mid-sentence. "This has nothing to do with you." I couldn't help but chuckle at her outburst. "You see, Marla, that's where you're wrong. This has everything to do with the both of you and your complete disregard for consequences." Marla opened her mouth to retort, but I held up a hand, silencing her. "No, let me finish. For years I've watched you manipulate and scheme, always taking what you wanted without a second thought for the fallout. You tried to turn Greg against me, you tried to take this house that wasn't rightfully yours, and all the while you've been living beyond your means, racking up debt like it was a badge of honor." Ron's brow furrowed as he processed my words, and I could see the realization dawning in his eyes. "Wait, so those loan conditions, the monitoring of the property value, that was all you?" I nodded, a sense of satisfaction washing over me. Indeed it was. I knew Marla's reckless spending habits would eventually catch up with her, so I simply facilitated the process. Marla's face contorted with rage as she struggled to her feet. Her fists clenched at her sides. "You manipulative bitch," she seethed, her voice trembling with barely contained fury. "How dare you try to take what's rightfully mine?" I couldn't help but laugh at the irony of her words. "Rightfully yours? Marla, you've never understood the concept of hard work and sacrifice. This house, this life that you so desperately coveted was built on the foundation of my blood, sweat, and tears. Greg may have left the ownership of this property ambiguous, but he knew in his heart who truly deserved it." As my words sank in, I could see the fight draining from Marla's body, her shoulders slumping in defeat. Ron, ever the passive accomplice, simply stood by silently, his expression a mixture of awe and resignation. "You played me," Marla whispered, her voice barely audible. "You let me think I had won, only to pull the rug out from under me." I nodded, a sense of vindication washing over me. "Yes, I did. And you know why? Because sometimes the only way to teach a lesson is through harsh, uncompromising consequences." As I turned to leave, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of pity for the broken woman before me. Marla had been her own worst enemy, her greed and entitlement blinding her to the reality of her actions. But as they say, karma is a bitch, and Marla had just learned that lesson the hard way. The soft ticking of the clock was the only sound that punctuated the silence as I sipped my tea, savoring the warmth and tranquility of my modest apartment. It had been several months since the fateful confrontation that had shattered Marla's delusions of grandeur, and in that time my life had settled into a comfortable routine. A knock at the door jolted me from my reverie, and I couldn't help but feel a twinge of apprehension as I rose to answer it. Peering through the peephole, my breath caught in my throat. It was Marla, looking more disheveled and defeated than I had ever seen her. Steeling my resolve, I pulled open the door, meeting her gaze with a measured calm. "Marla," I greeted, keeping my voice even, "to what do I owe this unexpected visit?" She shifted uncomfortably, unable to meet my eyes. I need your help, Della," she mumbled, the words seeming to stick in her throat. I raised an eyebrow, fighting back the urge to gloat at her admission of vulnerability. "My help? After everything that's happened, you still have the audacity to ask for my assistance?" Marla flinched as if I had struck her, her shoulders slumping in defeat. I know, she said, her voice laced with a weariness that tugged at my heartstrings. "I was a complete monster to you, and I don't deserve your kindness." Sighing, I stepped back and gestured for her to enter. "Well, you might as well come in and explain yourself." As she settled onto the couch, I couldn't help but notice the shadows under her eyes and the pallor of her skin, telltale signs of the stress and turmoil she had endured in recent months. "I've hit rock bottom, Della," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "After losing the house and everything else, Ron left me. My credit score is in shambles, and I can barely make ends meet." A flicker of sympathy stirred within me, tempered by the lingering resentment of her past transgressions. "And what do you expect me to do about it?" I asked, my tone neutral. Marla's eyes glistened with unshed tears as she met my gaze. "I need guidance, Della. I need you to teach me how to pick up the pieces and start over, the right way, this time." For a long moment I studied her, searching for any hint of deceit or manipulation. But all I saw was a broken woman, humbled by the harsh lessons of consequence and karma. Finally I nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. "All right, Marla, I'll help you, but on my terms. This won't be an easy road, and you'll have to follow my lead without question." Relief washed over her features, and she nodded eagerly. "Anything, Della. Just tell me what to do." As I outlined the steps she would need to take, budgeting, rebuilding her credit, finding steady employment, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. Not for the revenge I had exacted, but for the opportunity to guide Marla onto a path of redemption and self-growth. "It won't be easy," I cautioned her. "But if you truly commit to this journey, I promise you'll emerge stronger and wiser than ever before." Marla nodded, her eyes shining with determination. "I'm ready, Della. I've learned my lesson, and I won't squander this second chance." As she left, a weight seemed to lift from my shoulders, replaced by a sense of hope for the future. Revenge might have been the catalyst that set us on this path, but in the end, it was about more than just retribution. It was about teaching the harsh lessons of life and giving someone the opportunity to rise from the ashes of their mistakes, reborn and renewed. And for that, I would always be grateful. I stared at my reflection in the mirror, practicing the fake smile I had perfected over the years. My heart sank as Melanie's cruel words replayed in my mind. "Just to be clear, you are nor never will be a part of this family. So don't expect to be at my wedding." Her icy tone cut through me like a knife, reopening old wounds I thought had long healed. I had sacrificed so much for Doug and his daughter, enduring years of hostility and rejection from Melanie, all in the hopes of one day being accepted as part of their family. It was a harsh reminder of how far I had come, from a driven career woman who once prioritized success over personal relationships to a devoted wife and stepmother. Meeting Doug at that corporate event years ago had been a whirlwind romance, and his warmth and earnestness had melted my icy exterior. Little did I know that marrying a single father would be the greatest challenge of my life. Melanie, then a precocious 10-year-old, had made it clear from the start that I was an unwelcome intruder in her world. My attempts at bonding were met with indifference or outright hostility. The forgotten lunchboxes, the skipped school events, and the blatant disrespect were all painful reminders that I would never truly be accepted as her mother. Doug tried his best to bridge the gap, but even he couldn't control Melanie's escalating defiance as she entered her teenage years. The lies, the stolen money, and the constant arguments strained our marriage to its limits. And now, as Melanie prepared to marry Trent, a wealthy architect from a prominent family, she had made it abundantly clear that I would never be a part of her life. Her hurtful words, "You're just an ATM and a maid, my real mom's family, not you," had shattered any remaining hope I harbored. But this time I wouldn't sit idly by and accept her cruelty. A plan was forming in my mind. A carefully orchestrated revenge that would expose Melanie's true colors and the deceit she had woven around her perfect life. As I looked into the mirror, I saw a steely determination in my eyes, a resolve born from years of hurt and rejection. This time I would be the one holding the cards, and Melanie would learn the hard way that actions have consequences. I couldn't help but smile as I reminisced about the day I first met Doug. It was at a corporate event, and I was immediately drawn to his warm, genuine demeanor. Little did I know that our chance encounter would lead to a whirlwind romance and a life-altering decision. Doug was a divorced father of one, and his 10-year-old daughter Melanie was his world. He spoke of her with such pride and adoration that I couldn't help but be charmed. When he asked me out for coffee, I agreed without hesitation, intrigued by this man who seemed to have his priorities in order. Over the next few months, our connection deepened, and I found myself falling for Doug's kindness and unwavering devotion to his daughter. He was a stark contrast to the ruthless corporate world I was accustomed to, and his gentle nature was a breath of fresh air. It wasn't long before Doug proposed, and I said yes without a second thought. I was ready to take on the role of a stepmother, confident that with time and effort, Melanie would come to accept me as part of her family. Little did I know that the road ahead would be paved with obstacles and heartbreak. From the moment I moved in, Melanie made it clear that I was an unwelcome intruder. Her icy glares and cold shoulders were a constant reminder that I was an outsider in her world. I tried everything I could to connect with her, from baking her favorite treats to attending her school events, but she remained distant and aloof. "Why don't you just leave us alone?" she would snap whenever I attempted to engage with her. "You'll never be my real mom." Doug tried to intervene, but Melanie's defiance only grew stronger as she entered her teenage years. She began skipping school, lying to us, and even stealing money from my purse. Each incident was like a dagger to my heart, and I couldn't help but question whether I had made the right decision in marrying into this family. "Please, Melanie, give Rita a chance," Doug would plead, his voice laced with desperation. "She loves you like her own." But Melanie was having none of it. "She's not my mother, and she never will be," she would snarl, her eyes filled with disdain. As the years passed, the rift between us only widened, and I found myself retreating into my work as a means of escape. I had sacrificed so much for this family, and yet I felt like a stranger in my own home. But now, with Melanie's wedding looming, I couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. Perhaps this would be the turning point, the moment when she would finally accept me as part of her life. Little did I know that her cruelty would reach new heights, shattering any remaining illusions I had about our relationship. As Melanie entered her teenage years, her defiance and hostility towards me reached new heights. I couldn't count the number of times I had come home to find her room in disarray, clothes strewn across the floor, and the lingering scent of smoke hanging in the air. "Melanie, we need to talk about this," I would say, my voice trembling with a mixture of frustration and concern. She would simply roll her eyes and brush me off with a dismissive wave of her hand. "Mind your own business. You're not my mother." Those words, uttered with such venom, never failed to cut me deep. I had tried so hard to be a positive influence in her life, to be the supportive and nurturing figure she so desperately needed, but my efforts were met with nothing but contempt. Doug, bless his heart, did his best to mediate the situation, but even his pleas fell on deaf ears. "Melanie, please show some respect," he would say, his brow furrowed with worry. "Rita is trying her best." "Trying her best at what?" Melanie would snarl, her eyes narrowing with disdain. "Trying to replace my real mom? Well, newsflash, it's never going to happen." Her words stung like a slap to the face, and I couldn't help but feel like a failure. No matter how hard I tried, I could never seem to bridge the gap between us. Things only got worse as Melanie's rebellion escalated. She began skipping school, lying about her whereabouts, and even stealing money from my purse to fund her escapades. I would come home to find my carefully packed lunch for her untouched, the sandwiches growing stale and the fruit withering away. "Where have you been?" I would demand, my heart racing with fear and frustration. "None of your business," she would snap, brushing past me without a second glance. The final straw came at one of her high school events, where I had gone out of my way to attend, hoping to show my support and perhaps finally earn a modicum of respect from her. But as I approached her group of friends, smiling and waving, Melanie's reaction was nothing short of devastating. "What are you doing here?" she hissed, her eyes narrowing with disdain. "You're not my mother. Stop pretending you are." The words hung in the air like a thick, suffocating fog, and I could feel the eyes of her friends upon me, judging and pitying me in equal measure. In that moment, I had never felt more embarrassed, more humiliated, and more like an outsider in my own family. As I retreated, hot tears stinging my eyes, I couldn't help but wonder how much more of Melanie's cruelty I could endure. I had sacrificed so much for this family, for the dream of being accepted and loved, but it seemed like a lost cause. Little did I know that the worst was yet to come, and Melanie's vicious words on the eve of her wedding would be the final straw that unleashed a storm of revenge that had been brewing for years. When Melanie announced her engagement to Trent, a young, ambitious architect from a wealthy family, I couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. Perhaps this would be the turning point in our relationship, the moment when she would finally accept me as part of her life. But as I soon discovered, my optimism was misplaced. Trent was a charming young man, with a confident demeanor and a bright future ahead of him. As he and Melanie shared the details of their whirlwind romance, I couldn't help but be struck by the stark contrast between them. He was poised and articulate, while Melanie seemed almost childlike in his presence, her usual defiance replaced by a strange docility. "We're so excited to start this new chapter together," Trent gushed, his arm draped protectively around Melanie's shoulders. I forced a smile, pushing down the nagging doubts that had begun to surface. "Congratulations," I said, my voice strained. "I'm so happy for you both." Melanie barely acknowledged me, her eyes fixed on Trent with an almost worshipful gaze. It was as if I was invisible, a mere footnote in her life. As the wedding planning began, Melanie's true colors quickly resurfaced. She became increasingly dismissive and condescending towards me, treating me more like a servant than a member of the family. "Rita, can you make sure the caterers have everything they need?" She would bark, her tone laced with impatience. When I tried to offer suggestions or input, she would shut me down with a wave of her hand. "Don't worry your pretty little head about it," she would say, a cruel smirk playing on her lips. "Just leave the important decisions to the real family." And then, just days before the wedding, the final blow came. "Just to be clear," Melanie said, her words slicing through me like a knife, "you are nor never will be a part of this family, so don't expect to be at my wedding." The venom in her voice was unmistakable, and I felt my heart shatter into a million pieces. After years of trying, of sacrificing, of enduring her cruelty in the hopes of one day being accepted, she had made it abundantly clear that I would never be anything more than an outsider. "You're just an ATM and a maid," she spat, her eyes narrowed with contempt. "My real mom's family, not you." In that moment, something shifted within me. The hurt and anger that had been simmering beneath the surface for years finally boiled over, and a newfound sense of determination took hold. I would no longer be the victim, the one who cowered and accepted her abuse. It was time for me to take control, to orchestrate a plan that would bring Melanie's carefully constructed world crashing down around her. As I watched her fawn over Trent and his wealthy family, a seed of an idea began to take root. If she wanted to treat me like an outsider, then I would make sure she got her wish, and so much more. The wheels were in motion, and Melanie's precious wedding day would be the stage for a revenge years in the making. With a newfound determination burning within me, I set my plan into motion. Melanie thought she could treat me like an outsider, like a mere servant in her grand scheme of things. Well, she was about to learn just how wrong she was. I started by discreetly digging into her financial records, scouring through bank statements and credit card bills. It didn't take long to uncover a trail of deceit and mishandling that would make even the most seasoned con artist blush. Hidden bank accounts, credit cards maxed out on extravagant purchases, and a lifestyle far beyond what her meager income could support. It was all there, laid bare before my eyes. Melanie had been living a lie, and I had the evidence to prove it. At first, Doug was hesitant when I presented my findings to him. He had always been the peacekeeper, the one who tried to smooth over the tensions between Melanie and me. But as the depth of her deception became clear, even he couldn't deny the gravity of the situation. "This is serious, Rita," he said, his brow furrowed with concern. "If what you're saying is true, she could be facing legal consequences." I nodded, my jaw set in determination. "Believe me, it's all true. And it's time she learns that actions have consequences." With Doug reluctantly on board, I began to meticulously plan my revenge. Every detail had to be perfect, every move calculated to ensure maximum impact on Melanie's precious wedding day. I reached out to my network of contacts, calling in favors and greasing palms to ensure that the right people would be in the right place at the right time. It was a delicate dance, a high-stakes game of chess where one wrong move could topple the entire house of cards. But I was determined, fueled by years of rejection and humiliation at the hands of Melanie. This was my moment, my chance to finally take control and show her just how far I was willing to go to protect myself and my family. As the wedding day drew closer, the tension in our household was palpable. Melanie strutted around like a queen, barking orders and treating us all like her personal servants. Doug tried his best to keep the peace, but even he couldn't hide the concern etched onto his face. "Are you sure about this, Rita?" he asked me one night, his voice hushed and tinged with worry. I gave him a reassuring squeeze on the shoulder, my confidence unwavering. "Trust me, Doug. It's time for Melanie to face the consequences of her actions." And as I finalized the last details of my plan, I couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation coursing through my veins. Melanie had no idea what was coming, no inkling of the storm that was about to descend upon her carefully curated world. The stage was set, and the curtain was about to rise on what promised to be the most dramatic and satisfying revenge I had ever orchestrated. The wedding day dawned bright and sunny, a stark contrast to the storm that was about to unfold. As Doug and I arrived at the lavish venue, I could feel the anticipation building in the pit of my stomach. This was it, the moment I had been carefully orchestrating for months. Melanie, resplendent in her white gown, was already ensconced in the bridal suite, surrounded by her attendants and a flurry of activity. She barely acknowledged our presence, too caught up in the whirlwind of her own self-importance. "Just make sure you stay out of the way," she snapped at me, her eyes narrowed with disdain. "This is my day, and I won't have you ruining it." I forced a smile, nodding obediently. "Of course, Melanie, whatever you say." As the guests began to arrive, the tension in the air was palpable. Trent's family, with their impeccable pedigree and designer outfits, mingled among the crowd, casting disapproving glances in our direction. Doug fidgeted nervously beside me, his fingers tapping against his leg in a restless rhythm. "Are you sure about this, Rita?" he whispered, his voice laced with concern. I gave his hand a reassuring squeeze, my resolve unwavering. "Trust me, Doug, it's time for the truth to come out." As the ceremony began, I couldn't help but feel a sense of exhilaration coursing through my veins. The first domino was about to fall, setting off a chain reaction that would shatter Melanie's carefully constructed facade. And then, just as the officiant was about to begin the vows, a commotion erupted at the back of the venue. All eyes turned to see a delivery man pushing his way through the crowd, a large envelope clutched in his hand. "Delivery for Mr. Trent Holloway," he announced, his voice echoing through the hushed silence. Trent's brow furrowed in confusion as he stepped forward to accept the package. "What is this?" he muttered, tearing open the envelope. That's when all hell broke loose. As Trent rifled through the contents of the envelope, his face contorted into a mask of shock and fury. "What is the meaning of this?" he bellowed, his voice trembling with rage. Melanie's eyes widened in panic as she rushed to his side. "Trent, what's going on?" But Trent wasn't listening. He held up the damning evidence, his eyes boring into Melanie's with a mixture of betrayal and disgust. "How could you, Melanie? All these lies, all this deception?" The guests erupted into a flurry of whispers and gasps, their perfectly coiffed heads swiveling between the two like spectators at a tennis match. Melanie's face drained of color, her lips trembling as she tried to formulate a response. "Trent, I can explain." But it was too late. The truth was out, and there was no going back. As Trent continued to confront Melanie, laying bare her web of lies and financial misdeeds, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction washing over me. This was it, the moment I had been waiting for, the moment when Melanie's cruelty and deceit would finally come crashing down around her. "Trent, how could you do this now?" she screamed, her voice shrill and desperate. But Trent was having none of it. "How could I?" he roared, his face twisted with fury. "How could you, Melanie? You've been lying to me, to all of us, from the very beginning." As the chaos unfolded, I caught Doug's eye from across the room. He gave me a small nod, a silent acknowledgement of the justice that was being served. And in that moment, as Melanie's world crumbled before our very eyes, I knew that I had finally taken control. The years of rejection, the constant belittling, the feeling of being an outsider in my own family, It had all led to this moment of sweet, satisfying revenge. Melanie may have thought she could treat me like a servant, but in the end, it was I who had pulled the strings, orchestrating her downfall with precision and cunning. And as the repercussions of her actions began to rain down upon her, I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication, a validation that my sacrifices and pain had not been in vain. The curtain had fallen on Melanie's grand charade, and I was the one left standing, triumphant and unapologetic. As the chaos unfolded around us, it was as if time itself had ground to a halt. The lavish wedding venue, once a vision of elegance and grandeur, had been transformed into a battleground of betrayal and recrimination. Trent's face was contorted with fury, his fingers clenched tightly around the damning evidence of Melanie's deceit. "How could you do this to me, Melanie?" he roared, his voice reverberating through the hushed silence. "How could you lie and manipulate me like this?" Melanie, for once, was at a loss for words. Her carefully cultivated facade of poise and confidence had shattered, revealing the true colors of her selfish and manipulative nature. She opened and closed her mouth like a gasping fish, her eyes darting frantically around the room, seeking an escape from the harsh glare of judgment that surrounded her. "Trent, please?" She finally managed to choke out, her voice trembling with desperation. "It's not what it looks like. I can explain." But Trent wasn't having any of it. With a swift motion, he tore off the ring that had symbolized their ill-fated union, hurling it to the ground with a clatter. "There's nothing to explain, Melanie," he spat, his eyes narrowed with contempt. "You've been playing me for a fool from the very beginning, and I won't stand for it any longer." Around us, the guests erupted into a cacophony of whispers and gasps, their perfectly coiffed heads swiveling back and forth like spectators at a tennis match. Melanie's own family, the ones she had held in such high regard, recoiled in horror, their faces etched with a mixture of shock and disgust. And in the midst of it all, there was Doug, standing by my side, his hand clasped tightly in mine. "We're here just to see the truth come out," he murmured, his voice laced with a strange sense of resignation. "Justice doesn't need an invitation." As the confrontation between Trent and Melanie escalated, the details of her deception spilled forth like a foul-smelling torrent. Hidden bank accounts, fraudulent loans, and a litany of lies that had formed the very foundation of her carefully constructed life. It was all laid bare for the world to see. Melanie's face contorted with rage, her eyes narrowing into slits as she turned her gaze towards me. "You," she hissed, her voice dripping with venom. "This was you, wasn't it? You're behind all of this." I met her accusation with a steady gaze, unflinching in the face of her fury. "I merely provided the truth, Melanie," I said, my voice calm and measured. "You're the one who chose to live a lie." With those words, it was as if a dam had burst within her. Melanie let loose a torrent of vitriol, hurling insults and threats in my direction with reckless abandon. But her words held no power over me anymore. I had finally broken free from the shackles of her cruelty, and I reveled in the sweet taste of vindication. As the chaos swirled around us, I caught sight of Trent's family huddled together, their faces etched with grim determination. It was clear that the legal repercussions of Melanie's actions were already taking shape, and the consequences she had so carelessly ignored were about to come crashing down upon her. And in that moment, as I watched the very foundation of her carefully curated world crumble before my eyes, I couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph wash over me. The years of rejection, the constant belittling, the feeling of being an outsider in my own family, it had all led to this moment of sweet, satisfying justice. Melanie may have thought she could treat me like a servant, but in the end it was I who had pulled the strings, orchestrating her downfall with precision and cunning. And as the repercussions of her actions began to rain down upon her, I knew that my sacrifices and pain had not been in vain. The curtain had fallen on Melanie's grand charade, and I was left standing tall, vindicated, and unapologetic. Justice, it seemed, had finally found its way home. In the aftermath of Melanie's grand unraveling, the world seemed to move in slow motion. The once pristine wedding venue lay in shambles, a crumpled reminder of the charade that had come undone with such spectacular force. As the dust settled, the true extent of Melanie's deception became painfully clear. Lawsuits from Trent's family rained down like a relentless storm, each one a damning indictment of her lies and financial misdeeds. Charges of fraud and embezzlement loomed large, casting a dark shadow over her once promising future. And through it all, Melanie remained defiant, lashing out at anyone who dared to cross her path. "You'll all pay for this," she snarled, her eyes wild with fury. "Nobody does this to me and gets away with it." But her threats rang hollow, mere echoes of the power she had once wielded with such impunity. The world had seen her for who she truly was, a manipulative, deceitful woman who had built her life on a foundation of lies. As the legal proceedings dragged on, Doug and I found ourselves caught in the eye of the storm. Lawyers and investigators swarmed around us, their questions probing and relentless. But through it all, we stood united, a bulwark against the chaos that threatened to engulf us. "We did the right thing," Doug would murmur, his hand clasped tightly in mine. "She brought this upon herself." And as the months wore on, the once indomitable Melanie began to crumble under the weight of her own actions. The family she had once held in such high esteem turned their backs on her, their disdain and disappointment a palpable force. Even her own mother, Nancy, couldn't bring herself to defend her daughter's actions. "I never thought she would stoop so low," she confessed to me one day, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. Where did I go wrong? It was a question that haunted us all, a reminder that sometimes even the best of intentions can lead to the darkest of outcomes. But through it all, I found solace in the knowledge that justice had been served. Melanie's reign of terror had come to an end, and the scars she had inflicted upon our family were finally beginning to heal. As the chaos subsided and a new sense of normalcy began to take hold, I couldn't help but feel a profound sense of gratitude wash over me. The path had been long and arduous, paved with heartache and sacrifice, but in the end, it had all been worth it. And then, just when I thought the world couldn't possibly hold any more surprises, fate intervened with a gift more precious than I could have ever imagined. It was a crisp autumn morning when I felt the first flutters of life within me, a subtle reminder that even in the darkest of moments, hope can still take root. As the realization dawned upon me, tears of joy streamed down my face, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. When I shared the news with Doug, his eyes lit up with a joy I hadn't seen in years. "A new beginning," he whispered, pulling me close. "A chance to do things right." And as we stood there basking in the warmth of our newfound happiness, I couldn't help but feel a sense of peace wash over me. The past had been a tumultuous journey, but now, with the weight of Melanie's cruelty lifted from our shoulders, we were free to embrace the future with open arms. This time, I vowed, things would be different. Our family would be built on a foundation of love, respect, and understanding, a stark contrast to the pain and betrayal that had once threatened to tear us apart. As I cradled my growing belly, I couldn't help but smile at the thought of the little life growing within me. This child would know only love, only acceptance, and would never have to endure the heartache that had once been our constant companion. The storm had passed, and in its wake, a new dawn was breaking, one filled with hope, forgiveness, and the promise of a brighter tomorrow. I stared at Chris's still body, numb with shock and grief. The heart monitor's flat line echoed through the room, a cruel reminder that the man I loved was gone forever. Just then, the door burst open. Emily stormed in, her face contorted with rage. "You think you can pretend to care for me now after everything you've done?" Her accusation felt like a slap in the face. I opened my mouth to respond, but what could I say? Our relationship had been strained for years, ever since I married her father. "I'm not your real mother, and I never will be," I stated, my voice trembling. It was a harsh truth, but one we both knew deep down. Emily sneered. "Don't act so innocent. You manipulated my dad from the start, worming your way into our lives. And for what? His money?" "That's not true," I protested, though a part of me wondered if she was right. Had I been blinded by Chris's wealth and status? No, I loved him, didn't I? "Save it," Emily spat. "I'm going to make sure you don't get a single cent. You're nothing without him." Her words cut deep, reigniting every insecurity and doubt I'd harbored over the years. As she stormed out, I sank into the chair beside Chris's bed, burying my face in my hands as sobs racked my body. How had things gone so wrong? When Chris and I first met, I'd been drawn to his kindness, his warmth. He made me feel alive in a way I hadn't experienced in years. And despite my initial reservations about dating a man with a child, I'd fallen hopelessly in love. But Emily had never accepted me. From the moment I stepped into her life, she viewed me as a threat, an intruder. No matter how hard I tried to connect with her, she shut me out, her teenage angst morphing into a cold, calculated cruelty as she grew older. And Chris, bless his soul, had been too soft on her, too eager to keep the peace. He'd enabled her behavior, siding with her against me time and again until I felt like an outsider in my own marriage. Now, with Chris gone, I was truly alone, facing the wrath of a vengeful stepdaughter who seemed determined to destroy me. As the weight of Emily's hatred bore down, I knew one thing for certain: the battle for Chris's legacy, for my very future, had only just begun. I met Chris at a company party, back when I was working in HR at a tech firm. He walked into the room, and it was like the air shifted. I couldn't take my eyes off him. His warm smile, the confident way he carried himself. When our eyes met, something sparked between us. After the party, I couldn't stop thinking about him. A few weeks later, we ran into each other at a cafe, and he asked me out. I said yes, despite the little voice in my head warning me about his complicated situation. On our first date, he was open about his past, his failed marriage, his struggle to connect with his daughter Emily after the divorce. I admired his honesty, his vulnerability. Over dinner, I found myself drawn to his values, his desire to be a better father and partner. The more time we spent together, the deeper I fell. Chris treated me with a tenderness and respect I'd rarely experienced in my years as a single woman. He made me feel cherished, special. But I couldn't ignore the shadow that loomed over our relationship: Emily. At 16, she was a sullen, resentful teenager who clearly blamed me for her parents' divorce. She refused to give me a chance, shooting me icy glares whenever I was around. Chris tried his best to make it work, to blend our lives together. We took family trips, had game nights, went out for nice dinners. But the tension was always there, simmering beneath the surface like a dark undercurrent. "She's just going through a phase," Chris would say, wrapping his arms around me. "She'll come around eventually." I wanted to believe him, but Emily's coldness only seemed to deepen with time. Our family dinners were a war zone, with her firing off snide comments and rolling her eyes whenever I spoke. Chris would shoot her warning looks, but he never truly disciplined her, too afraid of pushing her away. As the months passed, I started to see Emily's true colors. She was manipulative, playing Chris and I off against each other to get what she wanted. One week she'd give me the silent treatment, ignoring my existence. The next she'd be all smiles and charm, regaling Chris with stories of her academic achievements or volunteer work. "She's just trying to impress you," I told Chris after one particularly nauseating display. "Can't you see she's manipulating you?" But he refused to hear it, too blinded by his love for her, too desperate to have that father-daughter bond he'd always craved. Time and again, he'd make excuses for her behavior, enabling it, as if his indulgence could somehow make up for the sins of the past. Looking back now, I realize I should have run, saved myself from the heartache to come. But I was in too deep, and my love for Chris wouldn't let me abandon hope. The dangerous, foolish hope that one day, somehow, Emily would accept me. Little did I know that her hatred for me ran deeper than I could have ever imagined, and that the worst was still to come. After Chris and I got married, I hoped things might improve with Emily. I was her stepmother now, an official part of the family. Surely that had to count for something. But Emily remained as distant and hostile as ever. On our honeymoon, she called Chris multiple times, always with some dramatic crisis that needed his immediate attention. When we finally returned home, exhausted, she greeted us with a look of pure disdain. "Enjoy your little vacation?" she sneered as I walked through the door. I forced a smile. "It was lovely, thanks for asking." She rolled her eyes. "Whatever, at least now you got what you wanted, a rich husband to take care of you." The words stung, but I didn't rise to the bait. After setting my bags down, I turned to leave, only to hear her mutter under her breath, "Gold digger." I whipped back around, fury rising in my chest. "You know, Emily, I'm trying my best here, but you're making it impossible." "Alicia, Emily, that's enough," Chris's voice boomed, startling us both. He stepped between us, a pained look on his face. "Can't you two get along, just this once? For me?" Emily immediately softened, her expression turning contrite. "I'm sorry, Daddy. I'll try harder, I promise." She shot me a venomous glare, then brushed past us towards her room. Later that night, as we lay in bed, I turned to Chris. "I can't keep doing this. The way she treats me." "Shh." He pulled me close, stroking my hair. "Give it time. She's been through so much with the divorce. But she's a good kid deep down. She'll come around." I wanted to believe him, but months passed with no improvement. Emily remained sullen and withdrawn, alternating between ignoring me completely and making snide remarks whenever we crossed paths. Chris insisted on family dinners, saying it would help us bond. But they only seemed to make things worse. One night, over a meal of rubbery chicken and limp broccoli, Emily announced, "I got an A on my English paper. The professor said it was the best in the class." "That's wonderful, honey," Chris beamed. "I knew you could do it." He turned to me, his eyes shining with paternal pride. "Alicia, did you hear that? Isn't that great?" I forced a smile. "Yes, that's really impressive, Emily. Well done." She narrowed her eyes at me, nostrils flaring, as if my praise was deeply offensive. "It's no big deal, just something talented people can do." The barb hit its mark. I felt myself shrink under her withering gaze. Chris, ever the peacemaker, quickly changed the subject. But I could barely focus, Emily's words echoing in my mind like cruel taunts. After dinner, as I cleared the plates, Emily brushed past me with a sneer. "Thanks for doing your job, Cinderella." I sucked in a sharp breath, fighting back tears. Why was she so determined to hurt me at every turn? What had I done to deserve such venom from her? As the weeks rolled by, the isolation and anxiety took their toll. Some nights, I lay awake for hours, my mind racing with doubts. Was I the problem? Was I not trying hard enough? If only I could get through to Emily, make her see that I loved her father more than anything. But she seemed dead set on making my life a living hell. The young woman I'd hoped to form a bond with was little more than a vindictive stranger determined to shut me out. And the harder I tried to break through, the more viciously she lashed out, until one fateful day when all my worst fears would finally come to light. As Emily progressed through high school and college, her disdain for me only intensified. She became a master manipulator, using her charm and intelligence to wrap Chris around her finger whenever she wanted something. "Daddy, can I please get the new iPhone?" She'd coo, batting her long lashes. "All my friends have it, and I really need it for school projects." Chris would hesitate, looking at me uncertainly, but then Emily would pout those full lips, and he'd instantly cave. "Oh, all right, anything for my little girl." I'd try to reason with him later. "Chris, she's taking advantage of you. She doesn't need another new phone. Her old one works perfectly fine." But he'd just shake his head adamantly. "Alicia, you don't understand. I have to make up for all the years I missed when she was growing up. Just let me do this for her, okay?" And so it went, with Emily constantly working her wiles to get clothes, cars, vacations, you name it. While we lived comfortably, we certainly weren't the millionaires she seemed to think. But Chris never put his foot down, blindly indulging her every whim, no matter how outrageous or expensive. "Stop spoiling her rotten," I'd snap at him during our worst fights. "You're only encouraging her entitled, manipulative behavior." Chris's brow would furrow, anger flashing in his eyes. "Don't you dare talk about my daughter that way. She's been through enough. The least I can do is give her what she wants." His words sliced through me, the implication clear. Emily's needs would always come before mine. Before us. During Emily's college years, she pulled similar stunts to earn Chris's approval, regaling him with tales of her academic achievements and grand future plans, all while throwing me contemptuous glances, making it clear I'd never be a part of that brighter future she dreamed of. "I got an internship at a prestigious law firm," she announced one night at dinner, chin raised defiantly as she stared me down. "They said I'm on track to be a partner after I finish my degree." "That's wonderful, Pumpkin," Chris gushed, looking at her with naked pride. He turned to me expectantly. "Alicia, doesn't that sound impressive?" I forced a tight smile. "Yes, very impressive. Congratulations, Emily." She sneered at my lukewarm praise. "You could at least try to act like you care about my accomplishments. The hurt must have shown on my face because Chris immediately turned on me with a glare. "She's right, Alicia. You could be a bit more supportive." My cheeks burned with humiliation as his words washed over me. What did I have to do? Grovel at her feet? This pattern continued for years. Emily constantly one-upping me and rubbing her triumphs in my face, Chris fawning over her while admonishing me for not being sufficiently awed by his precious daughter's perfection. By the time Emily finished college and began working, the resentment and bitterness had driven an unbridgeable chasm in my marriage. We could barely look at each other without dredging up the emotional scars, the unhealed wounds of two parents caught in the merciless grip of divided loyalties. "I love you, Alicia, but she's my little girl," Chris would say helplessly during our worst clashes, as if those words could somehow justify or excuse the hell my life had become. I understood in a way. Emily was his flesh and blood, the living embodiment of the family he'd lost through his own failings. Making it up to her, regaining her approval, it had become his singular obsession. But at what cost? By allowing her hatred and manipulation to fester unchecked, Chris had enabled a rift that may never be mendable, a rift that would soon tear our whole world asunder. Little did I know that the worst was still to come, and that Chris's death would be the spark that ignited Emily's rage into an unholy blaze of vengeance. I'll never forget the night Chris died. We were having one of our usual tense dinners, the air thick with unspoken resentments. Emily had just announced some new career triumph, basking in her father's adoring praise while shooting me smug looks from across the table. Suddenly, Chris gasped and clutched at his chest, his face drained of color. "Al! Alicia!" In an instant, I was by his side as he crumpled from his chair. "Chris! Oh my God! Somebody call 911!" Emily just stood there, eyes wide with shock, making no move to help. I shot her a pleading look as I cradled Chris's head in my lap. "Emily, please, your father needs help." That seemed to snap her out of her daze. She fumbled for her phone with trembling hands and dialed emergency services. I stroked Chris's clammy forehead, murmuring desperate reassurances that everything would be okay, but his eyes had already taken on a glassy, distant look. His lips moved soundlessly as the life drained from his stricken body. The paramedics arrived and worked furiously to resuscitate him. But it was too late. Chris was gone, claimed by a massive heart attack at just 50 years old. I remember letting out a wail of anguished grief as they gently pulled me away, the love of my life now still and lifeless on the floor. Emily collapsed into a chair, face white as a sheet, looking more lost and afraid than I'd ever seen her. At the hospital, after they'd taken Chris away, Emily turned on me with undisguised fury burning in her red-rimmed eyes. You monster," she cried, her voice dripping with venom. "You think you can pretend to care for me now, after everything you've done, after how you treated my dad?" I recoiled, struck by the naked hatred radiating from her slight frame. "Emily, what are you talking about? I loved your father with all my heart." "Don't give me that crap." She jabbed a finger at my chest, her whole body trembling with rage. "You manipulated him from the start, wormed your way into our lives to get your hands on his money." Tears stung my eyes as her vicious words cut deep. "That's not true at all. Chris and I—" "Save it," she spat. "I'm going to make sure you don't get a single cent from him. You're nothing now that he's gone." A lump formed in my throat as the weight of her threat hit me. Oh, God, with Chris deceased, what would happen to me? To my whole life? The next few days were a blur of funeral arrangements and grieving relatives. Emily was cold and distant, refusing to so much as look at me. I felt like a pariah in my own life, the outsider once more. Then came the reading of the will. We gathered at the lawyer's office, Emily shooting me hateful glares from across the room. When the attorney opened the sealed documents, a hush fell over us all. "To my beloved wife Alicia," the lawyer read solemnly, "I leave the majority of my assets and holdings, including the house, investments, and—" "No!" Emily screeched, leaping to her feet. All eyes turned to her as she stabbed an accusing finger at me. "She manipulated him. That money is rightfully mine." I shrank in my seat, bracing for the onslaught as Emily's eruption of fury washed over me in waves. The lawyer tried to interject, but she was unstoppable, years of pent-up hatred and resentment finally unleashed. "You're going to pay for this?" she hissed, her chest heaving. "If it's the last thing I do, I'll make you suffer for what you've done to my family. You hear me? You're going to wish you never laid eyes on us." As a deathly silence descended, I knew with sinking dread that Emily's vicious threat was just the beginning. The battle lines had been drawn, and I was about to find myself in the fight of my life. Emily's meltdown at the reading of Chris's will was just the beginning of her crusade against me. In the days that followed, she launched into a relentless campaign of harassment and intimidation. "That money should be mine," she'd scream whenever she saw me. "You manipulated my dad into cutting me out." Her angry accusations followed me everywhere: the grocery store, the gym, even taking out the trash. She seemed determined to make my life a living hell at every turn. One afternoon, I arrived home from running errands to find her camped out on my front porch, eyes blazing with fury. "There you are, you lying, gold-digging witch," she spat as I approached. "Did you really think you could just take everything from me like that?" I sighed wearily. "Emily, please. Your father wanted me taken care of after he was gone. That's all this is." "Bullshit!" She shot to her feet, fists clenched. "I know you poisoned his mind against me over the years, turned him against his own flesh and blood." "That's not true at all," I said, struggling to keep my voice even. "I never tried to come between you two. Chris loved you more than anything." Emily barked a harsh laugh. "Yeah, and look where that got him, dead before his time, while you swooped in like a vulture to pick over the remains." The cruel words lanced through me like daggers. I blinked back tears, suddenly regretting my fruitless attempts to reason with her. "Just go, Emily," I said quietly, "before one of us says something we can't take back." For a beat, her face contorted in an almost feral snarl. Then, without warning, she lunged at me, hands outstretched like talons. I gasped and stumbled back as she made a grab for my hair, her long nails raking my cheek. "You evil, manipulative bitch." Instinctively, I shoved her away, sending her staggering backwards. She caught her balance, and we stared at each other, chests heaving, an unspoken line crossed. Emily's expression morphed into a vicious leer. "Don't think this is over. Not by a long shot. I'm going to destroy you. Do you hear me? Destroy. You." With that, she whirled and stormed off, leaving me shaken and nursing the welt already forming on my face. Over the next few weeks, the attacks escalated from the verbal to the undeniably criminal. My car tires were slashed repeatedly. Nasty, obscene graffiti was spray-painted across my garage door. Even a brick came crashing through my front window one night, narrowly missing my head. I went to the authorities, but they could do little without catching Emily in the act. She was careful to leave no fingerprints or witnesses, her bright future as a hotshot lawyer always at the forefront of her calculated attacks. "Please, you have to do something," I begged the detective assigned to my case. "She's unhinged, a complete danger to herself and others." The gruff officer just shrugged, unmoved. "Look, lady, I get that you're going through a tough time, but without hard evidence, there's not much we can do about a family dispute over some money." My protests fell on deaf ears. Emily had me cornered, and she knew it. The assaults just kept coming. Vile letters filled with threats and accusations, scratches along the sides of my car, and that malicious presence always lurking. I became afraid to leave my own home, jumping at every sudden noise or movement. The stress and fear were taking a heavy toll, both emotionally and physically. Some nights, I lay awake for hours, haunted by memories of Chris's warm smile and gentle touch, things I'd likely never experience again. That's when I realized with sinking dread that Emily's revenge went far deeper than mere money or inheritance. This was about stripping me of everything: my home, my safety, my very identity as Chris's wife, until I had nothing left but the torment of her hatred bearing down like a crushing weight. Something had to be done. I couldn't go on living like this, a prisoner in my own life. It was time to fight back, no matter how ugly or painful it became. Little did I know that confronting Emily's cruelty head-on would blow the lid off an even darker, more disturbing truth, and set me on a collision course from which there could be no return. I realized Emily's vendetta against me went far deeper than just jealousy or resentment over the inheritance. There was a twisted, almost pathological hatred burning within her, fueled by years of manipulation and deceit. The truth began to unravel when I was going through some old storage boxes and came across Chris's laptop from a few years back. On a whim, I booted it up and started browsing through his files, my heart aching at every photo and document reminding me of happier times. That's when I stumbled across a folder simply labeled Emily. My breath caught in my throat as I opened it and began reading through the contents. Emails, text messages, even voice recordings spanning years. Evidence of Emily's ongoing lies, sabotage, and efforts to undermine my relationship with Chris. It was all there in sickening detail. Fake emergencies and crises designed to pull Chris away from me. Exaggerated stories about me mistreating or neglecting her, voiced through teary phone calls pleading for her daddy's comfort and support. Even admissions from Emily about seeing a therapist for anger issues aimed at deliberately alienating me from the family. My blood boiled as I absorbed the damning messages one by one. So many of our marital problems, the endless fights and heartache, could be traced directly back to Emily's calculated machinations over the years. The vicious, remorseless depths she had sunk to in order to maintain her vice-like grip over Chris. When I finished reading through it all, I sat in stunned silence, tears of rage streaming down my cheeks. This whole time she had been gaslighting not just me, but her own father as well, playing us both like finely tuned instruments in her twisted campaign of sociopathic jealousy. That night, when Emily came barging into my home yet again to hurl more vile accusations, I was ready. I grabbed her by the wrist as she advanced, spinning her around and slamming her against the wall. "Let go of me," she snarled, struggling against my grip. "I'll have you arrested for assault." "Shut up and listen for once," I growled through gritted teeth. "I know what you've been doing all these years, you manipulative little monster." Her eyes went wide, jaw-dropping in an almost comical display of shock. What are you talking about?" Rather than explain, I released her and retrieved Chris's laptop from the other room, pulling up the file folder I'd uncovered earlier. Emily's eyes went flinty as she began scanning the documents and recordings, her mask of innocence shattering with each new revelation. "So this is how it's going to be," she spat, color rising in her cheeks. "You were always jealous of me and Dad's relationship. This is just some pathetic attempt to turn him against me, even in death." I could only stare at her in disbelief. "Are you deranged? Look at the evidence right in front of you. The lies, the sabotage. You had no problem deceiving and manipulating us to get what you wanted. Your own father," Emily sneered. "Please, he always took your side no matter what I did. Don't try pinning that on me." "You're sick," I shot back, disgust roiling in the pit of my stomach. "You've been playing the victim for years, but you're the one inflicting all this misery and destruction on this family." Her nostrils flared, lips peeling back in an ugly snarl. "This is far from over, you self-righteous bitch. In fact, it's only just beginning." She grabbed the laptop and hurled it against the far wall with a resounding crash, shattering the screen into a twisted spiderweb of shards. Then she whirled and stormed out, leaving a path of destruction in her wake. I sank to the floor, hands trembling as the full, ugly reality sank in. Whatever twisted psychological games Emily had been playing all this time, they had clearly warped her perception of reality entirely. There would be no getting through to her, no appeals to sanity or reason. I was well and truly trapped in her vengeful crusade. And as the ominous weight of her final threat hovered over me, I knew this was only the opening salvo of a war that could ultimately consume us both. After my confrontation with Emily and the chilling discovery of her years-long deception, I knew I had to take a stand once and for all. Her vindictive crusade had spiraled completely out of control. If I didn't put a stop to it immediately, there was no telling how far she might go. A few days later, I requested a meeting with Emily and laid it all on the line. We convened at a stuffy corporate office downtown, the air thick with distrust and barely concealed hostility. Emily swept in, wearing a power suit and permanent sneer, all false bravado and entitlement. Well, if it isn't the wicked stepmonster herself, to what do I owe this dubious pleasure? I squared my shoulders, mustering every ounce of resolve. "Cut the act, Emily. We're done playing games here." "Oh?" She arched an immaculately groomed eyebrow. "Is that so? Because from where I'm sitting, you're the one who needs to quit while you're behind." Jaw clenched, I slid a thick manila envelope across the table towards her. I have ironclad proof of your years of manipulation and sabotage. The lies, the fake emergencies, even admitting to therapy explicitly designed to alienate me from your father. Emily's bravado flickered for just a moment before her sneer returned full force. So you've got some circumstantial evidence, so what? That doesn't change the fact that he chose you over his own daughter in the end. Don't you get it? I shot back, anger rising. Your jealousy and entitlement drove a wedge between you two long before Chris died. He spent years enabling your behavior, indulging your every selfish whim. That struck a nerve. Emily's nostrils flared as she leaned across the table, eyes blazing. How dare you? You think you can psychoanalyze me when you're the one who wormed your way into our lives? Dad loved me more than anything until you showed up. I shook my head sadly. Emily, wake up. Your whole perception of reality has become dangerously warped. I'm not the enemy here. I'm the one trying to help you see the truth about yourself before it's too late. She opened her mouth, then seemed to think better of it, snapping it shut again, as her expression contorted in disgust. When she finally spoke, her voice was laced with venom. You're right about one thing. This does end today, but not how you think. She rose abruptly from her seat, knocking it over with a clatter. I'm taking you down, one way or another. Maybe then Dad's memory can finally be at peace, free from your poisonous influence. Emily, listen to yourself, I pleaded, alarmed by the maniacal glint in her eyes. You're unraveling. Whatever delusions you've been clinging to, it's time to let go. But she was already stalking away, shoulders squared and fists clenched. Over her shoulder, she spat, Don't worry, you smug bitch. When I'm through with you, everyone will finally understand my side of things. I'll make sure of it. After she stormed out, I sat in stunned silence, emotions churning. Despite laying everything on the table, Emily was too far gone, her hatred too entrenched. There would be no reasoning with her, no bringing her back from the brink of her self-destructive obsession. In that moment, I made a difficult choice. For my own safety and sanity, I would have to cut Emily out of my life completely. She had made her bed, and now she would be forced to lie in it, dealing with the consequences of her malice and delusion. I consulted legal counsel and began the process of freezing Emily out of Chris's assets and estate. The lawyers warned it would be an uphill battle, given her unrelenting stance, but I didn't care. Even if it meant draining my own funds to the last penny, I was prepared to fight her tooth and nail. True to form, Emily came unhinged when the court orders went through, locking her out of further claiming her inheritance. She launched an all-out legal war, hiring a team of vicious attack dog attorneys committed to paint me as the villain at any cost. But I was ready this time. With Chris's true legacy, the evidence of Emily's treachery and manipulation, on my side, I weathered the vicious court battles with grim determination. Time and again, her attempts to strong-arm and bully me were thwarted by cold, hard proof. The protracted legal maelstrom bled Emily's finances dry. Her shiny new career as a hotshot lawyer in jeopardy as creditors came knocking. In a cosmic twist of karma, she even faced potential disbarment as her dirty tactics and suspect actions unraveled into the harsh light. Through it all, I refused to back down or compromise. This was about more than money. It was about stripping away the twisted facade Emily had been hiding behind her whole life, forcing her to finally face the ugly reality of her own misdeeds and delusions. In the end, she brought the ruin upon herself. But I had reclaimed something infinitely more valuable than any inheritance: my self-respect, sense of justice, and the ability to move forward with Chris's loving memory intact. As the dust settled and I surveyed the wreckage Emily's hatred had wrought, I felt an unexpected pang of sadness. For all the pain she'd caused, some small part of me still mourned the loss of what could have been a real bond, a sincere connection with my husband's child, a true family united through more than shared trauma and resentment. But I knew, deep down, that dream had died long ago, poisoned by Emily's all-consuming jealousy before it ever had a chance to bloom. She had made her choices repeatedly and with malice in her heart, and now she alone would have to live with the consequences. As for me, it was time to step into a new chapter, free from the shackles of the past and filled with hard-won wisdom. Though the scars would never fully heal, I carried Chris's spirit with me, determined to honor his memory by embracing life and love once more. "You've got to be kidding me," I muttered, staring at the photo on Adam's phone. The teenage girl's sullen expression and dark makeup were unmistakable. It was Jenna, one of my most challenging tutoring students this year. Adam sighed deeply. "That's my daughter, Amelia. She'll be coming to live with us next week." My heart pounded as realization set in. Amelia was the daughter he had briefly mentioned from a youthful fling before we met. But to have her show up now, after 16 years? This troubled girl was going to be under our roof? "Why the sudden change?" I asked carefully, my mind spinning. Adam rarely spoke of his past indiscretions. He shrugged. "Her mother's being deployed overseas for work. Amelia didn't want to move, so she'll stay with us." I studied his impassive expression, suspecting he wasn't being fully truthful. Still, this was a bombshell, a secret daughter upending our peaceful life together. Over the next few days, I watched Adam transform our guest room into a teenage girl's bedroom, painting the walls purple and setting up a desk for studying. I wondered if he was trying to atone for his past negligence as a father. When Amelia, or Jenna as I knew her, arrived, it was even more bizarre seeing her defiant sneer in our hallway. In my tutoring sessions, she had been constantly disruptive, with a concerning lack of effort. "Hey," she muttered flatly as Adam introduced us. I could already sense the challenges ahead with such a problematic houseguest. That first night, I overheard Amelia on a call in her room. "This place is a prison, Mom. I don't know how long I can keep up this stupid act." My stomach dropped. I had suspected Jenna came from a troubled home, but could she and her mother be putting on an elaborate con? Using Adam's own guilt against him for their gain? I knew I would have to tread very carefully. Over the next few weeks, Amelia's presence became increasingly disruptive. Her rude comments and blatant disregard for our household rules quickly frayed my nerves. Adam, however, seemed oblivious, or perhaps unwilling to address her behavior. "She's just a teenager finding her way," he'd say with a dismissive wave whenever I brought up her latest transgression. "Give her some space." Space? The girl was slowly taking over our home like an ill-mannered squatter. Her rooms were constantly trashed, she'd leave messes everywhere, and I'd catch her sneaking out at night multiple times. "Amelia, we need to talk about your actions," I stated firmly one morning after discovering she had stolen my good bottle of bourbon. "This cannot continue." She rolled her eyes defiantly. "Yeah, whatever. You're not my real mom." "Maybe not, but I deserve basic respect in this house," I shot back, my temper flaring. "Your father works hard to give you a home here." "Oh, Daddy works so hard, does he?" she sneered. "For whose benefit, I wonder?" The insinuation hung heavy in the air. I opened my mouth to retort, but Adam stepped between us. "That's enough, both of you. Amelia, go to your room." As she stormed off, I turned to Adam incredulously. "You're actually taking her side? After that attitude?" He avoided my gaze. "She's just a kid, Claire. Lashing out is normal for her age. So her blatant disrespect is okay? You're making excuses." We argued heatedly until I finally gave up, retreating to the bedroom in fuming silence. This was not the life I had envisioned when I married Adam. A few days later, I made a discovery that turned my world upside down. While using Adam's computer for work, I noticed his email was still logged in. Telling myself I shouldn't snoop, I started to close it, but a particular name in his inbox caught my eye. Jessica. My heart raced as I opened the email thread. The conversations dated back months before Amelia's arrival. Jessica was apparently her mother, and the emails detailed their plan for Amelia to move in and make herself at home with us. It was all a scheme, a ploy to insert their way into our lives, and judging by the frequent mentions of getting what's owed, likely for financial gain. I felt sick realizing Adam had been lying to me this entire time. Worse, Amelia, Jenna, was fully complicit. This was my own troubled student, now living under my roof to help fleece her own father. The deception made my head spin. I spent the next few days quietly observing Amelia's behaviors through new eyes. The sneaking out, the rudeness, it was all an act to aggravate Adam and destabilize our household. A long con that my husband had agreed to, for reasons I didn't yet understand. As much as it pained me, I knew I needed to play along for now and gather more evidence. To take them down, I needed to be 2 steps ahead in their own twisted game. Amelia's presence became increasingly unbearable after my discovery of the emails. Knowing she was actively conning us, her every action took on new insidious meaning. The smirks, the sass, the blatant disregard for our house rules, it was all choreographed to undermine Adam and destabilize our home life. "You left your crap all over the living room again," I stated coldly one evening as she sauntered in from another late night out. She shrugged, popping a piece of gum loudly. So, this is our home, not a flophouse. Show some respect." "Respect?" She laughed mockingly. "That's rich, coming from you." I bristled, fighting to keep my anger in check. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Like you even know the first thing about me or my life." "Maybe if you acted like a normal human being instead of a rude, entitled brat." "Hey!" Adam's voice cut me off as he entered. "What's going on here?" "Just dealing with your daughter's wonderful attitude as usual," I snapped. Amelia smirked. "Daddy's little princess has a problem following rules, I guess." "Don't start," I warned, but Adam raised his hands placatingly. Okay. Let's all just take a deep breath, all right?" I shook my head in disgust, storming off to the kitchen, as if his calm negotiations would stop this act they were putting on. The worst part? I couldn't even confide in Adam about my discoveries. He was clearly complicit in this scheme with Amelia's mother Jessica, revealing what I knew could spook them into accelerating their con. No, I needed to bide my time and continue gathering evidence to expose their plot. Starting with finding out exactly what getting what's owed meant in those emails. Over the next few weeks, I scoured Adam's computer and files whenever he was away at work, searching for any paperwork or communications that could shed light on Jessica's motivation. What I found made my blood boil. Years ago, when Adam was briefly involved with Jessica, he had gotten her pregnant with Amelia. Instead of taking responsibility, he paid Jessica a lump sum of money to walk away and terminate the pregnancy. Except she hadn't. And now, years later, they were back to extract even more from him through this deception. I felt physically ill realizing the depths of Adam's past betrayal and how Amelia was being used as a pawn for her mother's revenge. This was no longer just a con. It was a vicious, calculated scheme to make my own husband miserable. When Adam returned home that evening, I could barely look at him. He must have sensed my anger because he pulled me aside with forced cheerfulness. "Hey, what's going on? You've seemed really tense lately." I met his gaze levelly. "Have I? Gee, I wonder why that could be, with your lying, conniving daughter making our lives hell." His expression faltered. "Claire, I know she's been difficult, but she's my child. Your child that you once wanted terminated," I hissed, no longer caring about playing dumb. "That's what this is really about, isn't it? Jessica's revenge for you trying to make Amelia disappear." Adam's face drained of color. For a long moment he could only sputter uselessly. I shook my head in disgust. "I can't even look at you right now." Turning, I headed upstairs, my mind racing with the next steps. With Adam's secret out in the open, there was no more holding back. It was time to dismantle this sick little family con once and for all, by whatever means necessary. With Adam's past deception now exposed, the tension in our household was thick enough to cut with a knife. Amelia continued her calculated misbehavior, no doubt trying to further destabilize our home on her mother's behalf. I, however, was done playing their game. If Adam was too cowardly or complicit to put a stop to this, I would take matters into my own hands. "We need to talk," I stated firmly, cornering Amelia in the kitchen one morning before she could slink back to her room. She rolled her eyes. "About what?" "About you and your mother's little scheme to extort money from my husband." Her bravado faltered for just a moment before the sneer returned. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't play dumb. I know all about the emails between your mom and Adam, plotting for you to move in and make yourself at home here." I stepped closer, keeping my voice low and menacing. "Using his own daughter as a pawn to get what's owed? That's low, even for him." Panic flickered across her face before the mask of indifference returned. "You're crazy, lady. I'm just living here, that's all. After he paid your mother to have you terminated as a pregnancy?" That struck a nerve. Amelia's fists clenched, her eyes burning with hatred I hadn't seen before. "That's a lie. My mom wouldn't." "Wake up," I snapped, feeling perverse satisfaction at her shock. "Your mom's just using you as a tool for payback over Adam's past choices. This is all one big con. Amelia opened her mouth to respond, but a new voice cut through the tension. That's enough. Adam stood in the doorway, fury etched across his features as he pulled Amelia protectively behind him. You've gone too far, Claire. Making up lies to turn my own daughter against me? I laughed derisively. That's rich, coming from you. I have the emails, Adam. All the proof of your pathetic deal with Jessica to make Amelia disappear years ago. That's what this has all been about, her revenge, using your own flesh and blood. For once, Adam seemed at a loss for excuses or placating words. Amelia stared between us, her expression unreadable. Well, I pressed, aren't you going to admit to your lies, your betrayal of me, of your own family? Adam's jaw tightened, and I wondered if he might finally come clean. If this would be the moment where, "Get out!" The quiet venom in his voice stopped me cold. What? You heard me, he stated, wrapping an arm around Amelia. After the cruel, vindictive lies you've spewed, I want you out of this house, tonight. My heart dropped to my stomach as the words hit like a physical blow. Adam, you can't be serious. This is my home, too. Not anymore, he said with chilling finality. Not after you've made it so toxic with your deranged accusations against my daughter. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. He was choosing them, the ones deceiving and manipulating him, over his own wife. Tears stung my eyes as I looked between their impassive faces. In that moment, I felt more alone than I ever had before. Swallowing hard, I met Adam's gaze with as much dignity as I could muster. You'll see the truth soon enough, and when you do... I shook my head slowly. Well, don't come crawling back to me. Turning, I headed upstairs to pack what few belongings I could quickly gather. My home, my life, was crumbling around me, but I wouldn't go down without a fight. If Adam was too blinded by familial bonds to see the truth, I would make him open his eyes. Whatever it took, I would expose this twisted scheme and make them pay. The real battle was only just beginning. After Adam kicked me out, I spent a few aimless weeks crashing with friends, my mind spinning over how to expose Jessica and Amelia's twisted scheme. I couldn't simply walk away, not with that vile mother using her own daughter as a pawn against my husband. Eventually, I settled into a small rental apartment, using what little savings I had to get by. More importantly, it gave me a base to operate my counterattack and gather indisputable proof of their con. My first move was to make copies of the damning emails between Adam and Jessica that I had discovered. I also began meticulously documenting every instance of Amelia's calculated misbehavior at home to build a case against her. Next, I hired a private investigator to start digging into Jessica's background. Within weeks, they uncovered a trail of shady activities, unpaid loans, evictions, and a string of wealthy ex-boyfriends she had burned. This was clearly a long pattern of deception on her part. Armed with this new evidence, I requested a sit-down with Adam at a neutral location, a coffee shop near his office. He arrived looking haggard and defensive. What is this about, Claire? I have nothing left to say to you after your unforgivable behavior. I slid the thick manila envelope across the table. This is about the truth, the whole truth about your lies, and the con your ex and daughter have been pulling on you. Adam hesitated before flipping open the envelope, his brow furrowing as he thumbed through the documents inside. The email transcripts, the PI's report on Jessica, my logs of Amelia's troublemaking. As the weight of the evidence became undeniable, I could see the conflict playing across his face. Part of him still wanted to cling to deluded denial, but the proof was far too compelling. You went this far? He finally said, seemingly unsure whether to be awed or outraged. I leaned forward intently. I had to, Adam. After the way you turned on me and kicked me out over their lies, you left me no choice but to take this into my own hands. Shame flickered across his features, but he remained defensive. Even if some of this is true, Amelia is still my blood. You don't understand how important that is. I shook my head sadly. You're right, I don't, because you never gave me the chance to understand by being honest with me from the start. My voice had risen, drawing glances from nearby tables. I took a breath to rein in my anger. Look at the evidence, Adam. Look at what kind of person Jessica really is, using your own child to try to fleece you. Where does her manipulation end? How much further will she go? He didn't respond, his jaw tensing as he avoided my stare. For a long moment, An uncomfortable silence stretched between us. Finally, he spoke in a hoarse murmur. "You're right. I should have been upfront with you about Amelia from the beginning. I didn't want to risk losing you over my past mistakes." "Well, you did lose me," I stated flatly. "The question now is, are you going to continue letting them use and manipulate you? Or are you finally going to stand up and be a man?" Adam's shoulders slumped, all the fight seeming to go out of him. He looked utterly defeated in that moment, a broken man slowly coming to grips with the reality he had avoided for too long. "I don't know," he muttered, staring down at the envelope's damning contents. "I just don't know anymore." Pushing back from the table, I stood to leave. He didn't try to stop me. "Think it over," I said quietly. "And remember, the truth won't go away, no matter how hard you try to ignore it." As I walked away, I felt a surprising sense of calm determination. For too long I had been on the defensive against Adam and his deceptive family, but now the battlefield was level. The weapons of truth and justice were finally on my side. It was time to go on the attack. Several tense weeks went by without a word from Adam after our confrontation. I tried not to get my hopes up that he was finally seeing the light about Jessica and Amelia's twisted scheme. He had been too deep in denial for too long. Then one evening my phone rang, Adam asking if we could meet again to talk. I agreed, bracing myself for whatever excuses or rationalization he might throw my way next. When we met at a quiet bar, however, Adam looked utterly despondent. Broken, even. "You were right," he stated flatly after we sat down. "About all of it. Jessica, Amelia, the lies, the manipulation. It was all one big con." Despite the vindication, I felt no joy or satisfaction as I studied his haggard expression. "How did you finally realize?" I asked quietly. Adam dragged a hand down his face, suddenly looking decades older. "After you showed me all that evidence, I couldn't keep deluding myself anymore. I started digging deeper into Jessica's past like you did, and—" He shook his head slowly. "Let's just say she has a pattern of using men to bankroll her lifestyle, then discarding them once she's bled them dry." "So you were just the next target for her and Amelia to sink their claws into," I murmured. "Exactly. And I was the perfect mark, a successful businessman with assets, blinded by my own guilt and desire to play father to the daughter I abandoned." A rueful, self-loathing laugh escaped his lips. "She played me like a damn fiddle from the start." "And Amelia?" I pressed. "What did she have to say when you confronted her about the truth?" A flicker of anguish passed over Adam's features. "At first she denied it, calling me crazy and paranoid like they had you, but once I showed her ironclad proof of her mother's patterns, she just went cold and silent." He slowly shook his head. "My own daughter? Conspiring with her mother to take me for everything I have. All these years, she never gave a damn about having me in her life. I was just a mean to an end for their sick game." Despite everything, I felt a pang of sadness seeing the dejected man before me, forced to confront such an ugly truth about his own flesh and blood. "I'm so sorry, Adam," I said quietly. "As much as they hurt and betrayed me too, I can't imagine the pain of having your own child turned so monstrous." A hollow laugh escaped his lips. "Well, we reap what we sow, don't we? This is the price for the lies and cowardice in my past, running away from problems instead of facing them." I didn't disagree. Adam's refusal to take responsibility for his past mistakes had opened the door for Jessica to slither back into our lives with her poisonous agenda. "So what now?" I asked carefully. "What are you going to do about them?" Adam's jaw tightened, a flash of the strong man I'd married briefly returning to his eyes. "The only thing I can do. Cut them off for good, once and for all. No more money, no more enabling their sick need for revenge." He looked up at me intently. "And No, I need your help, Claire. You're the only one who had my back through this nightmare, even when I was too blind to see it." I considered for a moment, part of me still stung by the cruel way he had turned on me in siding with Jessica and Amelia before. But seeing this broken man, reaching for a last shred of redemption, I knew I couldn't turn away. Slowly, I reached across the table and grasped his hand, squeezing it firmly. "You've got it. We'll take them down together, for good this time. No more lies, no more running. It's time they finally face the consequences." Adam's eyes glistened with a mixture of shame, relief, and renewed determination. He simply nodded. The reckoning was coming. And this time, nothing would stop justice from being served. With Adam finally seeing the truth about Jessica and Amelia's twisted con, we wasted no time springing into action. First order of business, cutting off their access to his money and assets before they could bleed him dry. We met with Adam's lawyers and accountants, laying out the evidence I had gathered so they could erect a legal fortress protecting his finances. Bank accounts were frozen, investment portfolios locked, even his personal credit cards canceled. If those two vipers thought they were going to continue living off my husband's dime, they had another thing coming. Next, we moved to separate Amelia from her enabler mother's influence. Adam contacted Jessica, demanding she come to the house to collect her daughter's belongings immediately. When she arrived with Amelia in tow, I could practically see the dollar signs in their eyes. "What's going on, Adam?" Jessica simpered, all fake concern. "Why are you kicking my baby out?" "Can it?" I snapped before Adam could respond. "We know all about your little scheme to fleece him using Amelia. The con is over." Jessica's sugary facade quickly melted into a sneer. "You've got no proof of anything, just more of your deranged ramblings, Claire." Smirking, I tossed a thick manila envelope at her feet, the contents spilling out, copies of emails, financial records, the PI's report laying out her patterns of deceit. "Oh, I've got proof all right. Reams of it." Her eyes widened as she scrambled to scoop up the papers, realization dawning. She turned to Amelia desperately. "Baby, this crazy bye. Don't talk to her." Adam's voice boomed. "Surprising us all, you've both done enough here. More than enough." For once, Amelia seemed cowed by her father's intensity, shrinking back slightly. Jessica, however, rallied in defiant anger. "You're making a big mistake, Adam, after everything I've done for you, letting you be part of Amelia's life." "Letting me?" Adam shook his head in disgust. "Using her as a pawn to try to fleece me over past mistakes? That's not any kind of favor. It's reprehensible, and it stops now." You can't do this," Jessica sputtered, panic creeping in as she realized her con was crumbling. "We're family." "No," Adam stated with chilling finality. "You're not my family anymore. Just another mistake to finally put in the past." Jessica opened her mouth to respond, but seemed to think better of it, shooting me a look of pure venom before storming out the door, Amelia slinking behind her. As the door slammed, I let out a long breath, adrenaline still coursing through me from the confrontation. Adam simply stood motionless, his expression unreadable. "Well, they're out of our lives for good now," I ventured carefully. "You did the right thing, Adam." He gave a slow nod, still seeming lost in thought. "Maybe. Maybe not. All I know is I can't let that toxicity continue poisoning everything I hold dear." I studied him for a long moment before speaking again. "For what it's worth, I'm proud of you for facing this head-on. Not many men would have had the strength." Adam's gaze finally met mine, stripped of the bravado and denial that had blinded him for so long. I only wish I had that strength sooner, before it all spiraled so far out of control. We stood in silence for a long stretch, the weight of the situation, of all the hurt and betrayal, hanging heavy between us. So much had been lost on the way to this point. Finally, Adam seemed to shake himself from his reverie. "Well, I suppose I should start putting my life back together. Try to salvage what I can." I gave him a sad smile. "For both our sakes, I hope you can." As I watched him turn and head upstairs, I felt an unexpected pang of melancholy. His entire world had been shattered upon the rocks of lies and deception. But in that wreckage, there was a chance to finally rebuild something stronger. Whether that new life would involve me, however, remained to be seen. For tonight, I simply felt a sense of relief that the worst was over. The con had failed, and sometimes just surviving is victory enough. In the aftermath of finally cutting Jessica and Amelia out of our lives for good, an uneasy truce settled over Adam and me. We were two wounded soldiers, battered from the same war, but still struggling to find common ground. He spent most of his days holed up in his home office, no doubt trying to salvage what was left of his career and finances after having to legally batten down the hatches. I could only imagine the professional embarrassment of having to admit he'd fallen victim to such an insidious family con. As for me, I drifted in the limbo of our guest room, unsure of what my next move should be. Part of me still loved Adam, still wanted to fight for the life we'd had before this nightmare descended, But could I ever truly trust him again after how thoroughly he had dismissed and turned on me? We rarely spoke beyond courteous nods in passing. The shadow of betrayal hung too heavy between us. Then one evening, a heated argument from Adam's office caught my ear. Voices raised in anger, his, but also an unmistakable snide female tone. I crept down the hallway toward the cracked door. "You think you've won?" It was Jessica, venom dripping from her words. "You arrogant son of a bitch, you haven't seen the last of this." "Get off my property before I call the police, you vindictive snake," Adam snarled. "You've already cost me everything." "Not everything, lover," she purred menacingly. "Not yet." There was a pause, then the unmistakable sound of a struggle. Objects clattering, Adam grunting in anger and exertion. I couldn't stop myself. I burst through the door to see them grappling, Jessica clutching a heavy paperweight as they tussled. "Adam!" I cried in horror, rushing forward to try and separate them. Suddenly, a searing pain lanced through my head as something struck me from behind. White lights exploded in my vision, and I crumpled dazedly to the floor, my world spinning. "Claire!" Adam's voice seemed to come from a vast distance. "Oh God, Claire!" Blearily, I could make out shapes moving, voices distorting in and out as unconsciousness threatened to claim me. A furious Adam snatching the paperweight from the floor, Jessica's mocking laughter as she backed away. "Who's the snake now, lover? Enjoy the sweet taste of my revenge." Then her voice faded, the only sound Adam's ragged breathing as he cradled me. I could feel warm stickiness spreading through my hair, each pulse of my heartbeat a spike of agony. "Stay with me, baby," Adam pleaded, voice thick. "Don't you dare leave me too." I wanted to respond, to reassure him, but the words stuck in my throat. Blackness crept in from the edges of my vision until everything faded to void. The next days, or was it weeks, passed in a drug-addled haze of pain and disjointed images. Hospital rooms, the acrid stench of antiseptic, murmurs of words like severe concussion and touch and go. When I finally reemerged into full consciousness, it was to find Adam slumped in a chair beside my bed, haggard and unshaven. He startled awake as I stirred, his eyes widening in relief. "Oh, thank God," he rasped, voice cracking with emotion as he grasped my hand. I thought I might lose you too." I struggled to blink the cobwebs from my mind, memories slowly coalescing. "Jessica," I murmured. "She was there?" Adam's jaw tightened with barely contained rage, her final parting shot before the authorities apprehended her. She and Amelia are both in custody now, facing a laundry list of charges. Despite my pounding head, I felt a sense of grim satisfaction. At long last, they would face real consequences for their depravity. "I'm so sorry, Claire," Adam went on hoarsely. "If I had just been upfront from the start about Amelia, about my past, none of this would have happened. You never would have gotten hurt because of my lies." I could only gaze at him for a long moment, taking in the broken man before me. Once so self-assured and confident, now brought low by the very secrets he thought could be buried. "You're right," I finally said, squeezing his hand. "This all could have been avoided if you'd just been honest with me." Tears welled in Adam's eyes as he held my stare. "I've lost everything that ever mattered because of my mistakes. My job, my reputation. I'll be lucky if I can rebuild anything from the ashes." Gently, I stroked the stubbled plane of his cheek. "Not everything," I murmured. "Not yet." Adam's eyes widened slightly, a glimmer of hope flickering to life in their depths. A fragile, tentative spark in the darkness, but a spark nonetheless. As I gazed at the man I'd once loved, I knew the road ahead would be long and arduous. Rebuilding trust, piecing together whatever could be salvaged from the wreckage of lies and deceit. But if that spark could catch, if we truly had the strength to overcome the betrayals, perhaps there was still a chance to rekindle what we had lost. The choice would be ours to make. The sound of the doorbell echoed through the house, and I hurried to answer it, eager to see my son Caleb and his wife Alyssa. As I opened the door, a broad smile spread across my face, but it quickly faded when I saw the cold, hard expression on Alyssa's face. "Martha, do you really think you can just waltz into our lives like this? You're delusional if you think you're welcome here," she spat, her voice dripping with venom. I recoiled, taken aback by the sheer hostility in her words. Disbelief and anger swelled within me. How could my own son's wife speak so disrespectfully? This wasn't the sweet, caring Alyssa I had known when they first got married. Caleb stepped forward, his brow furrowed in confusion. Alyssa, what's going on? Why are you talking to my mother like that? Alyssa shot him a withering glare. Don't you see, Caleb? She's trying to worm her way back into our lives, just like she always does. We don't need her meddling. I opened my mouth to protest, but Caleb held up a hand, silencing me. Mom, I'm sorry, but maybe it's best if you go home for now. We'll talk about this later. His voice was strained, caught between his allegiance to his wife and his love for his mother. Tears pricked my eyes as I nodded wordlessly and stepped back, closing the door on their retreating figures. As I leaned against the solid oak, my heart heavy, I couldn't help but wonder what had happened to the gentle, loving daughter-in-law I had once known. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of tension and hostility. Whenever I tried to offer a helping hand around the house, Alyssa would rebuff me with cruel remarks or outright insults. It was as if she were determined to make me feel unwelcome in my own son's home. One evening, Alyssa hosted a family dinner, and I naively thought it might be an opportunity to mend fences. But as soon as the meal began, she launched into a tirade, accusing me of spoiling the food and making a mess in the kitchen. Honestly, Martha, can't you do anything right? She sneered, her eyes flashing with malice. Maybe it's time you stopped trying to be so involved in our lives. I sat there stunned into silence as Caleb shifted uncomfortably in his seat, unable or unwilling to confront his wife's behavior. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of awkward silences and forced small talk, and by the time Frank and I left, I felt utterly defeated. As the weeks turned into months, Alyssa's hostility only grew more pronounced. She would make snide comments about my cooking, criticize my appearance, and even go so far as to insult my intelligence in front of others. All the while, Caleb remained oblivious, either too wrapped up in his work or too afraid of confronting his wife to notice the rift that was tearing our family apart. As the weeks passed, Alyssa's hostility towards me only intensified. What had once been a warm, welcoming home felt more like a battleground, with every domestic chore becoming a source of conflict. One afternoon, I offered to help Alyssa with the laundry, thinking it might be a small gesture of goodwill. But as soon as I stepped into the laundry room, she rounded on me, her eyes narrowed with contempt. What do you think you're doing? She snapped, snatching the basket of clothes from my hands. I don't need your help. You'll just mess everything up like you always do. I tried to protest, to explain that I was simply trying to lend a hand, but she cut me off with a sharp wave of her hand. Save it, Martha. I know what you're up to. You're trying to make me look bad in front of Caleb, like I can't handle the simplest of tasks. Well, it's not going to work. Just stay out of my way. With that, she turned on her heel and stormed out of the room, leaving me standing there, stunned and hurt by the venom in her words. It wasn't just the household chores that became a battleground either. Alyssa seemed determined to make every family gathering a living hell for me. At one particularly tense dinner, she went out of her way to criticize every dish I had prepared, even going so far as to accuse me of using expired ingredients. Honestly, Martha, is it so hard to follow a simple recipe? She sneered, pushing her plate away with a look of disgust. No wonder Caleb and I rarely come over for dinner. Who knows what kind of food poisoning we might get? I felt my face flush with embarrassment as the rest of the family shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Caleb, as usual, said nothing, his gaze fixed resolutely on his plate. After the meal, as I was cleaning up in the kitchen, Alyssa sauntered in, a cruel smirk playing on her lips. You know, Martha, maybe it's time you accepted that you're just not cut out for this whole mother-in-law thing, she said, her voice dripping with condescension. You're always getting in the way, trying to insert yourself where you're not wanted. It's pathetic, really. I clenched my fists, struggling to keep my composure in the face of her cruelty. Alyssa, I don't know what I've done to deserve this kind of treatment from you, I said, my voice trembling with barely contained emotion. But this has to stop. You're tearing our family apart. She let out a cruel laugh, her eyes glinting with malice. Oh, please, don't act like you're the victim here, Martha. You're the one who's always meddling, always trying to undermine me. Well, I've got news for you. It's not going to work. I'm in charge here, and you'd better start respecting that. With that, she turned and stalked out of the kitchen, leaving me feeling more alone and helpless than ever before. As the months dragged on, it became increasingly clear that Alyssa's behavior was part of a calculated scheme to isolate me from my own family. Her manipulative tactics were subtle at first, but soon they became painfully obvious. It started with her suggestions that Frank and I should move in with them to help out around the house. At first, it seemed like a kind gesture, a way for us to spend more time with our son and grandchildren. But as the weeks passed, Alyssa's true intentions became clear. "You know, Martha, it's really not fair for you and Frank to be living on your own at your age," she would say, feigning concern. "You should be closer to us so we can take care of you properly." I would politely decline, assuring her that Frank and I were perfectly capable of caring for ourselves. But Alyssa was relentless, bringing it up at every opportunity until finally I agreed just to keep the peace. Little did I know, it was all part of her plan. A few months later, Caleb came to us with a proposal. "Mom, Dad, Alyssa and I have been talking, and we think it might be a good idea for us to move into a bigger house," he said, a hopeful smile on his face. "That way you two could come and live with us, and we could all be together as one big happy family." I should have seen the warning signs then, but I was so desperate to maintain some semblance of family unity that I agreed without hesitation. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity as we began searching for the perfect house. Alyssa was adamant that we find a place with enough space for all of us, promising that we would finally be able to live in harmony under one roof. But as the moving day drew closer, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. Alyssa's behavior had taken on a strange, almost manic quality, and there was a glint in her eye that made me uneasy. Still, I pushed those doubts aside, determined to make the best of the situation for the sake of my son and my grandchildren. The day we finally moved into the new house should have been a joyous occasion, but it quickly became clear that Alyssa had other plans. As we unpacked our belongings and tried to settle in, she made it abundantly clear that we were unwelcome guests in our own home. "I hope you don't think you're going to be able to just waltz in here and take over," she sneered, her eyes narrowed in contempt. "This is my house, and you'll follow my rules." I tried to reason with her, to remind her that we were all family and that we should be able to live together in peace and harmony, but Alyssa was having none of it. "Don't give me that family nonsense," she spat. "You're nothing but a burden, and I'm not going to let you ruin my life anymore." As I stood there, stunned and hurt by her cruelty, Caleb simply looked on, his expression blank and impassive. It was as if he had been completely blind to his wife's true nature all along. That night, as Frank and I unpacked the last of our belongings in the small guest room Alyssa had grudgingly allocated to us, I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread settle over me. This was supposed to be a fresh start for our family, but instead it felt like the beginning of the end. The housewarming party was supposed to be a celebration of our new life together as a family. But for Alyssa, it was merely an opportunity to drive the final nail into the coffin of our once happy relationship. As guests began to arrive, bearing gifts and well wishes, Alyssa made it a point to greet each and every one of them with a warm smile and a friendly embrace. But when it came to Frank and me, she treated us like unwanted strangers, barely acknowledging our presence. "Alyssa, shouldn't we go and greet Martha and Frank?" Caleb asked at one point, a hint of confusion in his voice. Alyssa fixed him with a withering glare. "Why bother?" she snapped. "They're not the ones hosting this party. They're just guests." The way she spat out that last word as if it left a bitter taste in her mouth sent a chill down my spine. It was clear that in her eyes Frank and I were nothing more than intruders in our own family. As the party wore on, Alyssa's behavior only grew more outrageous. She would intentionally exclude us from conversations or make snide remarks about our living situation whenever we tried to join in. "Oh, Martha, you're still here?" she would say, feigning surprise. "I thought you and Frank would have gone back to your room by now. Wouldn't want to overstay your welcome, would we?" Each time, I would feel my cheeks burn with humiliation, while Caleb simply stood by, doing nothing to defend us. But the final straw came when it was time to cut the cake. Alyssa had gone all out, ordering an elaborate, multi-tiered confection that must have cost a small fortune. As she gathered everyone around for the ceremonial slicing, she made a point of positioning Frank and me at the very back of the crowd, almost as if she were ashamed to be associated with us. "All right, everyone, gather round," she called out, her voice sickly sweet. "It's time to celebrate our new home and our new life together." She fixed me with a pointed stare as she said those last few words, her lips curled into a cruel smirk. As she began cutting into the cake, distributing slices to everyone except Frank and me, I felt a wave of anger and humiliation wash over me. This was supposed to be a time of joy and togetherness, but Alyssa had turned it into a twisted form of torture, designed to remind us of our place in her world. Finally, when the last slice had been handed out, Alyssa turned to us, feigning surprise. "Oh, Martha, Frank, I'm so sorry. I completely forgot about you two," she said, her tone dripping with false sincerity. "But I suppose it's for the best. You wouldn't want to ruin your figures with all that sugar, would you?" The laughter that rippled through the crowd was like a knife to my heart. In that moment, I realized that Alyssa had won. She had succeeded in turning our family against us, and there was nothing we could do to stop her. Tears stinging my eyes, I turned to Frank and said the words I never thought I'd have to utter. "Let's go, dear. I think it's time we left." As we made our way towards the door, I could hear Alyssa's mocking laughter ringing in my ears. But even as my heart shattered into a million pieces, a small spark of determination began to flicker within me. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Alyssa may have won the battle, but the war was just beginning. And I vowed, right then and there, that I would make her pay for every ounce of disrespect and humiliation she'd heaped upon us. In the days following the housewarming party debacle, Frank and I retreated into ourselves, nursing our wounds and trying to make sense of the cruelty we had endured. But as the shock and humiliation began to fade, a new emotion took root within me, a burning desire for revenge. It was then that I remembered a crucial detail that Alyssa had been kept in the dark about all these years, the financial support I had been secretly providing Caleb. You see, my son's job as an engineer didn't pay him nearly enough to support the lavish lifestyle Alyssa had grown accustomed to. So for years I had been funneling a portion of my retirement savings into his bank account each month, ensuring that he could keep up with her extravagant demands. And that's when the plan began to take shape. "Frank," I said one evening as we sat together in the small guest room that had become our sanctuary, "I think it's time we cut Caleb off." My husband looked at me, his brow furrowed in confusion. "Cut him off? But what about his financial situation? You know he can't afford to support Alyssa's spending habits on his own." I nodded, a grim smile spreading across my face. "Exactly. And when the money stops coming in and Alyssa starts to feel the pinch, that's when we'll make our move." Over the next few weeks, I meticulously executed my plan. I stopped the monthly transfers to Caleb's account, careful to cover my tracks and make it appear as though the funds had simply dried up. And sure enough, it didn't take long for the cracks in Alyssa's perfect little world to start showing. At first, it was just little things, complaints about having to cut back on luxury purchases or grumbling about the need to stick to a budget. But soon, those grumbles turned into full-blown tantrums, as Alyssa realized that the lavish lifestyle she had grown accustomed to was slipping through her fingers. "Caleb, what's going on?" I overheard her demand one night, her voice shrill with panic. "Why is there so little money in our accounts? We can barely afford to pay the bills this month." "I don't know, Alyssa," Caleb replied, his tone weary and defeated. "Things have just been tight at work lately. We may have to tighten our belts for a little while." But Alyssa was having none of it. She railed and raged, accusing Caleb of mismanaging their finances and threatening to leave him if he couldn't get things back on track. It was around this time that she started coming to me, her pride and ego battered, seeking handouts to sustain the lifestyle she had grown so accustomed to. "Martha, you have to help me," she pleaded, her eyes wide and desperate. "Caleb's finances are a mess, and we're barely scraping by. Surely you can spare a little money to help your daughter-in-law out?" But I remained resolute, feigning ignorance and refusing to give her a single cent. With each rejection, her desperation grew, until finally she reached her breaking point. "You miserable old hag," she screamed one day, her face twisted into a mask of rage. "I know you're behind this. You've been manipulating Caleb's finances all along, just to punish me. I simply stared back at her, my expression impassive. I have no idea what you're talking about, Alyssa, but if you're having financial troubles, perhaps it's time you reevaluated your priorities. With that, I turned and walked away, leaving her sputtering and fuming in my wake. And as I retreated to the sanctuary of my room, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction wash over me. The wheels of my revenge were in motion, and there was no stopping them now. As the financial strain on Caleb and Alyssa's household intensified, the once pristine facade of their perfect life began to crumble. Alyssa, accustomed to a life of luxury, was unraveling at the seams, her desperation growing with each unpaid bill and overdue notice that piled up. Her panic reached a fever pitch one evening when she barged into the guest room where Frank and I were staying, her eyes wild and her hair disheveled. "You have to help me, Martha," she pleaded, her voice trembling with desperation. "I don't know what's going on, but we're running out of money, and I can't make ends meet." I regarded her coolly, unmoved by her histrionics. "I'm sorry, Alyssa, but I don't understand what you expect me to do. Caleb is a grown man, and it's his responsibility to provide for his family." She let out a frustrated growl, her fingers curling into fists at her sides. "Don't play dumb with me, you old hag. I know you've been cutting off Caleb's income behind my back. This is all you're doing." I feigned innocence, shaking my head slowly. "I assure you, Alyssa, I have no idea what you're talking about. If you and Caleb are having financial troubles, perhaps it's time to reevaluate your spending habits." Her eyes narrowed dangerously, and for a moment I thought she might lash out at me physically, but instead she took a deep breath, seeming to regain some semblance of composure. "Fine," she spat, her voice laced with venom. "If that's how you want to play it, I'll just have to find another way to get the money we need." With that, she turned on her heel and stormed out of the room, leaving Frank and me in stunned silence. Over the next few weeks, I watched with a mixture of satisfaction and pity as Alyssa's world crumbled around her. She tried every trick in the book to keep up appearances, maxing out credit cards, taking out loans, even pawning her jewelry and designer handbags. But no matter what she did, the financial noose just seemed to tighten around her neck. Caleb, bless his heart, tried to reason with her, suggesting that they downsize or cut back on unnecessary expenses. But Alyssa was having none of it, stubbornly clinging to the lavish lifestyle she had grown accustomed to. "We can't let them win, Caleb," she would screech, her eyes wild with desperation. "They're trying to break us, but we have to stay strong." "Who's trying to break us, Alyssa?" Caleb would reply, his voice weary and confused. I don't understand what's going on. But Alyssa was too far gone, consumed by her own paranoia and greed. She lashed out at everyone around her, accusing them of conspiring against her, of trying to take away everything she had worked so hard for. Finally, one evening, Caleb reached his breaking point. "Alyssa, we need to talk," he said, his voice trembling with a mixture of anger and sadness. This can't go on anymore." She turned to him, her eyes narrowed with suspicion. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about your spending," he replied, his voice growing stronger with each word. "Your obsession with money and material things. It's tearing our family apart, and I can't live like this anymore." Alyssa's face contorted with rage, and she let out a bitter laugh. "Oh, I see what's going on here. Your precious mommy has finally gotten to you, hasn't she? She's been poisoning your mind against me all along." But Caleb shook his head, his expression resolute. "No, Alyssa, this isn't about my mother. This is about you and the way you've been treating everyone around you. It's toxic, and it has to stop." I watched from the shadows as the argument escalated, my heart pounding with a mixture of vindication and sorrow. This was the moment I had been waiting for. The moment when Alyssa's house of cards finally came crashing down around her. And as Caleb uttered those fateful words, "I want a divorce," I couldn't help but feel a sense of twisted satisfaction. The revenge I had so carefully plotted was finally coming to fruition, and Alyssa was getting exactly what she deserved. The divorce proceedings between Caleb and Alyssa were nothing short of a spectacle, a bitter and ugly battle that laid bare the true depths of her manipulative nature. At first, Alyssa tried to play the victim, painting herself as the innocent party who had been wronged by her husband and his meddling mother. She wept crocodile tears and spun tales of emotional abuse, trying to sway the mediator to her side. "He's been brainwashed by that woman," she sobbed, gesturing dramatically towards me. "She's been poisoning his mind against me from the start, filling his head with lies and turning him against his own wife." Caleb, to his credit, remained calm and steadfast, refusing to be baited by her theatrics. "This has nothing to do with my mother, Alyssa," he said, his voice firm and unwavering. "This is about your behavior, your constant spending, your disrespect for our family, your refusal to take any responsibility for your actions." Alyssa's eyes narrowed, and she let out a derisive snort. "Oh, please, don't act like you're some kind of saint, Caleb. We both know you've been struggling to keep up with my spending habits for years. That's why you've been taking handouts from your mommy dearest, isn't it?" A hush fell over the room, and I could see Caleb's jaw tighten as he processed her words. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, he turned to look at me, a mixture of confusion and hurt swirling in his eyes. "Mom? Is that true?" For a moment I considered playing dumb, feigning ignorance as I had done so many times before, but something in Caleb's gaze stopped me, a silent plea for honesty, for the truth that had been kept from him for so long. So, with a heavy heart, I nodded. "Yes, Caleb, it's true. For years, I've been supplementing your income to help Alyssa maintain her lavish lifestyle, but I stopped a few months ago, and that's when everything started to unravel." Alyssa let out a triumphant cackle, her eyes dancing with vindication. "See? I told you she was behind this whole thing. She's been manipulating us from the start, trying to turn you against me." But Caleb shook his head, his expression one of weary resignation. "No, Alyssa, you're wrong. My mother may have made some questionable decisions, but she wasn't the one who brought us to this point. That was all you." Alyssa's mouth dropped open, her perfectly manicured hands clenching into fists at her sides. "How dare you talk to me like that? After everything I've done for you, for our family." "Everything you've done?" Caleb echoed, his voice laced with disbelief. "Alyssa, all you've done is spend money we didn't have, disrespect my family, and make our lives a living hell with your constant demands and tantrums." He took a deep breath, his shoulders squaring as he steeled himself for what he was about to say. "That's why I'm done. I'm done with the lies, the manipulation, the constant drama. I want a divorce, and I want you out of our lives for good." The room fell silent, the weight of Caleb's words hanging heavy in the air. Alyssa's face contorted with rage, her carefully constructed facade crumbling before our very eyes. "You'll regret this, Caleb," she hissed, her voice trembling with barely contained fury. "You and that miserable old hag will both be sorry you ever crossed me." But as she stormed out of the room, her threats ringing hollow in our ears, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief wash over me. The battle had been won, and Alyssa's reign of terror was finally at an end. In the weeks and months that followed, the divorce proceedings dragged on, with Alyssa fighting tooth and nail for every last penny she could squeeze out of Caleb. But in the end, her manipulations and lies caught up with her, and she was left with nothing. No money, no possessions, no family to fall back on. As for Caleb and me, our relationship slowly began to mend, the wounds of her betrayal gradually healing with time and open communication. It wasn't always easy, and there were moments when I feared the rift between us might never be bridged. But in the end, the bond between a mother and her son proved stronger than any obstacle Alyssa could throw our way. And as we rebuilt our lives, free from her toxic influence, I couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude, not just for the justice that had been served, but for the chance to start anew, to build something better and more lasting than anything Alyssa had ever tried to destroy. In the aftermath of Caleb's divorce from Alyssa, a strange sense of calm settled over our lives. It was as if a dark cloud had finally lifted, allowing the warmth of a new beginning to shine through. For Caleb, the transition was not an easy one. He had spent years under Alyssa's toxic influence, and the scars of her manipulation ran deep. But with time and support from Frank and me, he slowly began to rediscover the person he had been before her, kind, hardworking, and devoted to his family. I'll never forget the day he came to me, his eyes filled with a mix of shame and resolve, and uttered the words I had been longing to hear. "Mom, I'm so sorry," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I should have seen what Alyssa was doing sooner. I should have stood up for you and Dad, instead of letting her treat you both so terribly. I reached out and took his hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. Caleb, you have nothing to apologize for. We're just grateful that you were able to break free from her hold before it was too late. He nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. That's all thanks to you, Mom. If you hadn't been so determined, so unwavering in your love for us, who knows where we'd be right now? In that moment, I felt a swell of pride and gratitude that went beyond words. To know that my actions, as difficult and painful as they had been, had ultimately saved my son from a life of misery and turmoil, it was the greatest reward I could have ever hoped for. As the weeks turned into months, Caleb threw himself into his work, finding solace in the familiar routines and challenges of his engineering career. Gone were the days of lavish spending and empty materialism. Instead, he embraced a simpler, more grounded existence, one that allowed him to rediscover the joy in the little things. And through it all, Frank and I were there, offering our unwavering support and guidance as he navigated this new chapter of his life. We shared meals together, went on family outings, and simply enjoyed the simple pleasure of being reunited as a family once more. Of course, there were moments when the ghosts of Alyssa's cruelty would rear their ugly heads. Sometimes Caleb would grow distant or withdrawn, lost in the memories of the pain she had inflicted upon us all. And on those days, Frank and I would simply hold space for him, offering a listening ear and a shoulder to lean on whenever he needed it. As for me, I found myself grappling with a strange mix of emotions. Relief, of course, at having finally put an end to Alyssa's reign of terror, but also a lingering sense of guilt over the lengths I had gone to in order to achieve that victory. Had I gone too far? Had I allowed my own thirst for revenge to cloud my judgment, to lead me down a path that, while effective, was perhaps not entirely ethical? These were the questions that kept me up at night, weighing heavily on my conscience even as I tried to move forward and embrace the newfound peace that had been restored to our lives. But in the end, whenever I looked at Caleb, at the joy and contentment that had returned to his eyes, at the way he carried himself with a renewed sense of purpose and self-worth, I knew that I had made the right choice. Alyssa's cruelty had nearly torn our family apart, and I had simply done what was necessary to protect those I loved most. Was it messy? Absolutely. Was it always pretty or morally pristine? Certainly not. But at the end of the day, I had reclaimed my son from the clutches of a toxic, manipulative woman, and that was a victory worth any price. So as Frank and I settled into our new normal, basking in the warmth of our reunited family, I couldn't help but feel a sense of quiet satisfaction. The road had been long and arduous, but we had emerged on the other side, scarred perhaps, but stronger and more resilient than ever before. And that, I realized, was the greatest revenge of all. The sun shone brightly through the kitchen windows as I bustled about, preparing a hearty Sunday lunch for my family. The aroma of roasted chicken and freshly baked bread filled the air, and I couldn't help but smile. These moments of togetherness meant the world to me. As I set the table, my daughter Hannah walked in, her eyes red and puffy. My heart sank. Mom, I don't know how to say this, but Peter, he's been having an affair for a long time. I found out last night. The words hit me like a ton of bricks. I rushed to her side, enveloping her in a tight embrace. Oh, sweetheart, I'm so sorry. Tears streamed down her face as she clung to me, her body shaking with sobs. The rest of the family trickled in, their chatter dying down as they sensed the somber atmosphere. What's going on? My son Michael asked, concern etched on his face. I took a deep breath. Everyone, please sit down. We need to have a family discussion. As they gathered around the table, I held Hannah's hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. Hannah has just found out that Peter has been unfaithful to her for quite some time. Gasps and murmurs filled the room. My husband, David, slammed his fist on the table. That bastard! How could he do this to our little girl? Hannah's lower lip trembled. I don't know what to do, Mom. I feel so lost. I looked her straight in the eye, my voice firm. You listen to me, Hannah. You are not alone in this. We are here for you every step of the way. We will get through this together, as a family. Nods of agreement and words of support echoed around the table. Michael wrapped an arm around his sister's shoulders. We've got your back, sis. Always. As the initial shock subsided, we began to discuss the next steps. I couldn't help but think back to my own troubled marriage with Hannah's father, Richard. The countless arguments, the cold shoulders, and the constant meddling from his mother, Agnes. It had been a difficult time, but I had emerged stronger, more resilient. I knew I had to be that pillar of strength for Hannah now. She needed me more than ever, and I was determined to guide her through this storm. First things first, I said, my voice steady. We need to make sure you and the children are safe, Hannah. If Peter's behavior escalates, we'll take legal action. Hannah nodded, wiping away her tears. I never thought it would come to this, Mom. I always believed we could work through anything. I squeezed her hand again. Sometimes, sweetheart, people change. And not always for the better. But you have to remember, this is not your fault. You deserve so much better than this. As the conversation continued, I couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. Anger towards Peter for betraying my daughter, sadness for the pain she was going through, but also a fierce determination to protect her, to help her navigate this difficult chapter in her life. I glanced around the table, taking in the faces of my loved ones. This was what family was all about, being there for each other through the good times and the bad. And I knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that we would weather this storm together. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the kitchen, I hugged Hannah tightly. We'll take this one day at a time, sweetheart. You're not alone. You have all of us, and we will never let you fall. With those words, I silently vowed to be Hannah's rock, her guiding light through the darkness, because that's what mothers do. We love, we protect, and we fight for our children, no matter what life throws our way. As I sat with Hannah in her living room, the weight of her revelation hung heavy in the air. My mind drifted back to my own troubled marriage with Richard, and the struggles I faced with his mother, Agnes. I remember how Agnes treated me, I said softly, taking Hannah's hand in mine. She never thought I was good enough, Hannah. Agnes always picked Richard's side, no matter how much I tried. You're not going through this alone. Hannah's eyes welled up with tears. I just don't understand, Mom. How could Peter do this to me, to our family? I sighed, the memories of my own pain resurfacing. Sometimes people change, sweetheart, and not always for the better, but you have to remember, this is not your fault. You deserve so much better than this. Just then the front door opened and Peter walked in, his face etched with annoyance. What's going on here? He demanded, eyeing me suspiciously. Hannah stood up, her voice trembling. Peter, we need to talk about your affair. Peter's eyes widened and he scoffed. I don't know what you're talking about, Hannah. You're being ridiculous. I couldn't hold back any longer. Don't you dare lie to her, Peter. She knows the truth, and so do I. Peter's face reddened with anger. This is none of your business, Nora. Stay out of it. I stood my ground, my voice firm. It became my business the moment you broke my daughter's heart. How could you do this to her, to your children? Peter rolled his eyes. Oh, please, spare me the lecture. You have no idea what goes on in our marriage. Hannah's voice cut through the tension. Enough, Peter. I can't do this anymore. I want you to leave. Peter's jaw dropped. You can't be serious, Hannah. You're overreacting. I placed a supportive hand on Hannah's shoulder. She's not overreacting, Peter. She's standing up for herself, for what's right. As Peter stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind him, Hannah collapsed into my arms, sobbing. I don't know what to do, Mom. I'm so scared. I held her tightly, my heart breaking for my daughter. I know, sweetheart, but you're not alone. We'll get through this together, I promise. The next day, I accompanied Hannah to her in-laws' house to break the news to Peter's mother, Elaine. As we sat in their pristine living room, Elaine's cold eyes bore into us. What's this all about? She asked, her voice dripping with disdain. Hannah took a deep breath. Elaine, I'm sorry to have to tell you this, but Peter has been having an affair. Elaine's eyes narrowed. And you believe this nonsense, Hannah? Really? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It's not nonsense, Elaine. Peter admitted it himself. Elaine scoffed. Well, if it's true, then you must have done something to drive him away, Hannah. A man doesn't just cheat on his wife for no reason. Hannah's eyes filled with tears, and I felt a surge of anger course through me. How dare you blame Hannah for this, Elaine? Your son is the one who broke his vows, who betrayed his family. Elaine stood up, her voice rising. I will not sit here and listen to you accuse my son of such things. If your daughter couldn't keep her husband satisfied, that's her problem, not mine. As we left Elaine's house, I couldn't shake the feeling of déjà vu. The way she had spoken to Hannah, the blame she had placed on her, it was all too familiar. It was the same way Agnes had treated me during my marriage to Richard. I turned to Hannah, my resolve hardening. We're not going to let them break you, sweetheart. You're stronger than they think. We'll find a way through this, together. As we drove home, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in my daughter. She was facing her darkest hour with grace and strength, just as I had all those years ago. And I knew, without a doubt, that we would weather this storm, no matter what obstacles lay ahead. Weeks passed, and the situation only seemed to worsen. Peter had started openly dating his lover, Kate, a younger coworker, humiliating Hannah and further straining their marriage. I watched helplessly as my daughter's once vibrant spirit slowly diminished, replaced by a constant cloud of sadness and despair. One afternoon, I decided to visit Hannah, hoping to offer some comfort and support. As I walked into her house, I was greeted by the sound of raised voices coming from the living room. I cautiously made my way towards the commotion, only to find Hannah and Elaine engaged in a heated argument. "You've failed as a wife, Hannah. Peter deserves better," Elaine cruelly told her, her words dripping with venom. Hannah's eyes welled up with tears, and I felt a surge of anger course through my veins. I stepped forward, placing a protective arm around my daughter's shoulders. "How dare you speak to her like that, Elaine?" I said, my voice trembling with rage. "Can't you see how much she's hurting?" Elaine scoffed, her eyes narrowing. "Oh, please, Nora. Don't act like you're some saint. You couldn't keep your own husband happy, and now look at your daughter. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree, does it?" I felt as if I had been slapped. The painful memories of my own failed marriage came rushing back, threatening to overwhelm me, but I refused to let Elaine see me crumble. I had to be strong for Hannah's sake. "You're wrong, Elaine," I said, my voice steady. "Hannah is not to blame for Peter's actions. He made the choice to betray his family, and he alone bears that responsibility." Elaine rolled her eyes. "Keep telling yourself that, Nora. But the truth is, if Hannah had been a better wife, none of this would have happened." With that, she stormed out of the house, leaving Hannah and me in stunned silence. I turned to my daughter, pulling her into a tight embrace as she sobbed against my shoulder. "I'm so sorry, Mom," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I feel like such a failure." I pulled back, cupping her face in my hands. "Listen to me, Hannah. You are not a failure. You are a strong, beautiful woman who deserves so much better than this. We're going to get through this together, I promise." As the days turned into weeks, I watched as Peter continued to flaunt his affair, parading Kate around town like some sort of trophy. Elaine, ever the enabler, stood by his side, defending his actions and blaming Hannah for the breakdown of their marriage. I felt my resolve harden with each passing day. I couldn't stand by and watch my daughter suffer any longer. I had to do something, anything, to help her break free from this toxic situation. One evening, as I sat with Hannah in her living room, I broached the subject of separation. "Hannah, sweetheart, I know this is difficult, but have you considered leaving Peter? You don't have to continue living like this." Hannah's eyes filled with tears. "I've thought about it, Mom, but I'm so scared. What about the children? What will people think?" I took her hand in mine, my voice firm. "The only thing that matters is your happiness and well-being, Hannah. You have to do what's best for you and the kids, and as for what people think, to hell with them. You have nothing to be ashamed of." Hannah nodded, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "You're right, Mom. I can't keep living like this. I need to be strong, for myself and for Emily and Jason." I smiled, pride swelling in my chest. "That's my girl. We're going to get through this, Hannah. You're stronger than you think. We'll find a way." As I left Hannah's house that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that a storm was brewing on the horizon. But I knew without a doubt that we would weather it together, no matter what challenges lay ahead. My daughter's happiness and freedom were worth fighting for, and I was ready to do whatever it took to help her reclaim her life. In the weeks that followed, I watched as Hannah slowly began to push back against Peter and Elaine's toxic influence. Encouraged by my unwavering support, She started to stand up for herself, refusing to be a victim any longer. One afternoon, as we sat in my kitchen sipping tea, Hannah confided in me about her plan to gather evidence of Peter's infidelity. "I need to protect Emily and Jason, Mom," she said, her voice trembling. "If we do end up separating, I want to make sure I have proof of Peter's affair to ensure the kids stay with me." I nodded, my heart swelling with pride at my daughter's strength and determination. "You're doing the right thing, Hannah. You don't have to continue living like this. We're stronger than they think. We will find a way." Just then, the doorbell rang. I excused myself and went to answer it, surprised to find my sister Diane standing on the other side. "Diane, what a pleasant surprise. Come in, come in." As we settled back in the kitchen, Diane's eyes fell on Hannah, and she immediately sensed that something was amiss. "What's going on, sweetheart?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. Hannah took a deep breath and began to recount the events of the past few months, from Peter's affair to Elaine's cruel treatment. As she spoke, I could see the anger and empathy building in Diane's eyes. "Oh, Hannah," she said, reaching across the table to take her hand. "I'm so sorry you're going through this. But you know what? You're not alone. I've been there too." Hannah's eyes widened. "You have?" Diane nodded, a sad smile on her face. "Years ago, my ex-husband cheated on me. It was the most painful experience of my life. But you know what I learned? That I was stronger than I ever thought possible. And so are you, Hannah." As Diane shared her own story of betrayal and resilience, I could see the glimmer of hope returning to Hannah's eyes. She had always looked up to Diane as a mother figure, and hearing that she had overcome a similar situation seemed to give her the strength she needed to keep fighting. Over the next few days, Hannah and I worked together to gather evidence of Peter's affair. We compiled text messages, emails, and even hired a private investigator to capture photos of Peter and Kate together. It was a difficult and emotionally draining process, but we knew it was necessary to protect Hannah and the children. As we sat in my living room, sorting through the evidence, Hannah suddenly broke down in tears. "I can't believe this is happening, Mom," she sobbed. "I never thought I'd be in this position, fighting for my marriage, my family." I pulled her into a tight embrace, stroking her hair as she cried. "I know, sweetheart, it's not fair, but you're doing the right thing. You're standing up for yourself, for your happiness. And that takes an incredible amount of courage." Hannah pulled back, wiping her tears. "But what about Emily and Jason? They need their father. Am I being selfish, putting my own happiness above their needs?" I shook my head, my voice firm. "Absolutely not, Hannah. Your children need a mother who is happy, healthy, and respected. They need to see you standing up for yourself, showing them that it's never okay to accept abuse or infidelity. You're setting an example for them, one of strength and self-worth." As the days turned into weeks, I watched as Hannah continued to gather her strength, preparing herself for the battle ahead. She knew that confronting Peter and Elaine would not be easy, but she was determined to reclaim her life, to build a better future for herself and her children. And through it all, I was there by her side, along with Diane, offering our unwavering support and love. We were a team, a united front against the darkness that threatened to tear our family apart. And together, we would find a way to overcome, to emerge stronger than ever before. The day I received a frantic call from Hannah, I knew something was terribly wrong. Her voice was shaking, and I could hear the tears in her words as she spoke. "Mom, I need you to come over right away. It's Peter. He's gone too far this time." I didn't hesitate for a moment. I grabbed my keys and rushed to Hannah's house, my heart pounding in my chest. When I arrived, I found her sitting at the kitchen table, her face pale and her eyes red from crying. "What happened, sweetheart?" I asked, taking a seat beside her. Hannah took a deep breath, her hands trembling. "I found out that Peter is planning to move Kate into our home. He wants her to live with us, to be a part of our family." I felt a surge of anger course through my veins. How could Peter be so cruel, so selfish, to not only betray his wife, but to flaunt his affair in front of his children, in the home they shared as a family? "I confronted him about it," Hannah continued, her voice growing stronger. "I told him that if he wants to be with Kate, he can have her, but he will not turn our home into some playground for his affair." I nodded, pride swelling in my chest. "Good for you, Hannah. You did the right thing, standing up for yourself and your children." But even as I spoke those words, I could see the fear in Hannah's eyes. She knew that this confrontation was only the beginning, that Peter and Elaine would not take her defiance lying down. And she was right. In the days that followed, Peter's backlash was fierce. He raged at Hannah, calling her unstable, unfit to be a mother. He threatened to take the children away from her, to paint her as a villain in the eyes of the court. Elaine, ever the manipulator, only fueled the flames. She whispered poisonous words in Peter's ear, telling him that Hannah was trying to destroy their family, that she was a danger to their children. I watched as Hannah struggled to maintain a sense of normalcy for Emily and Jason, even as the tension in the house reached a boiling point. She put on a brave face for them, reading them bedtime stories and helping them with their homework, all while Peter and Elaine's cruelty loomed over her like a dark cloud. But through it all, Hannah remained strong. She leaned on me and Diane for support, finding solace in our unwavering love and encouragement. And slowly but surely, I could see a change in her, a newfound resilience and determination that refused to be broken. One evening, as we sat together in my living room, Hannah turned to me with a fire in her eyes. "I want a separation, Mom. I can't keep living like this in a house filled with so much hatred and betrayal." I took her hand in mine, squeezing it tightly. "I'm so proud of you, Hannah. You're doing the right thing for yourself and for your children." Hannah nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of her lips. "I know it won't be easy, Mom. Peter and Elaine will fight me every step of the way, but I'm ready for it. I'm ready to take my life back, to build a better future for myself and my kids." As I looked at my daughter, I saw a strength in her that I had never seen before. She had been through so much, endured so much pain and heartache, but she had emerged from it all with a fierce determination to reclaim her happiness. And I knew in that moment that no matter what challenges lay ahead, no matter how hard Peter and Elaine tried to break her, Hannah would never give up. She would keep fighting, keep pushing forward, until she had built the life she deserved, a life filled with love, respect, and the unbreakable bonds of family. As the weeks turned into months, Diane, Hannah, and I worked tirelessly to gather evidence of Peter's infidelity and expose his true nature to the world. We knew that the only way to truly break free from his manipulation and cruelty was to reveal the truth, to show everyone the man he really was behind closed doors. It wasn't easy. Peter was clever, always careful to cover his tracks and maintain his public image as a devoted husband and father. But we were determined, driven by a fierce desire to protect Hannah and her children from any further harm. We started by hiring a private investigator, someone who could discreetly follow Peter and Kate and capture their indiscretions on camera. It was a risky move, but one we knew was necessary to build a strong case against him. As the evidence began to mount, I could see a change in Hannah. She walked with her head held high, a newfound confidence in her step. She was no longer the broken, defeated woman she had been just months before, but a fierce warrior, ready to fight for her freedom and her family. One evening, as we sat together in Diane's living room, poring over the latest batch of photos and videos, I turned to Hannah with a determined look in my eye. "It's time everyone sees Peter for who he really is. He can't keep hiding behind his lies." Hannah nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of her lips. "I'm ready, Mom. Let's do this." The next day we put our plan into action. We sent the evidence to Peter's employer, his colleagues, and even his friends and family. We posted it on social media, making sure that everyone in his circle saw the truth about the man they thought they knew. The response was immediate and explosive. Peter's reputation crumbled overnight as the community reeled from the shock of his betrayal. His employer fired him on the spot, disgusted by his behavior and the damage it had caused to their company's image. Elaine, too, felt the backlash of her son's actions. Her social circle began to shun her, appalled by her unwavering support of Peter's reprehensible behavior. She was left isolated and alone, forced to confront the consequences of her own manipulation and cruelty. But perhaps the most surprising development was Kate's reaction. When the evidence of her affair with Peter went public, she panicked, fearing the damage it would cause to her own reputation. In a moment of self-preservation, she abandoned Peter, leaving him to face the fallout alone. I watched as Peter's world crumbled around him as he lost his job, his lover, and his standing in the community. A part of me felt a twisted sense of satisfaction, seeing him finally face the consequences of his actions. But mostly, I just felt relief. Relief that Hannah was finally free from his grip, that she could start to rebuild her life without fear or manipulation. As the dust began to settle, I sat with Hannah in her living room, holding her hand tightly in mine. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart. You did it. You broke free." Hannah smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "I couldn't have done it without you, Mom, without you and Diane. You gave me the strength to keep fighting, even when I thought I had nothing left." I pulled her into a tight embrace, my own tears falling freely. "That's what family is for, Hannah. We lift each other up. We fight for each other, no matter what." As we sat there, holding each other close, I knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges and obstacles to overcome, wounds to heal, and trust to rebuild. But I also knew that Hannah was strong enough to face whatever lay ahead, that she had the love and support of her family to guide her through. And as I looked into my daughter's eyes, I saw a flicker of hope, a glimmer of the bright future that awaited her. A future free from pain and betrayal, filled with love, laughter, and the unbreakable bonds of family. Just when I thought the worst was behind us, Elaine showed up at my doorstep, her face a mask of fury and desperation. I hadn't seen her since the truth about Peter's affair had come to light, and I knew that her sudden appearance could only mean trouble. "We need to talk, Nora," she said, pushing past me and into the living room. "This family is falling apart, and we need to put this behind us." I followed her inside, my guard up and my resolve firm. "And how do you propose we do that, Elaine? Your son has caused immeasurable pain to my daughter and her children. There's no easy fix for that." Elaine whirled around, her eyes narrowing. "Don't you dare put all the blame on Peter. Hannah played a role in this mess, too. If she had been a better wife, none of this would have happened." I felt my blood boil at her words, the same twisted logic she had been using for months to justify Peter's actions. "How dare you, Elaine? Hannah has done nothing but love and support your son, even when he didn't deserve it. She is not to blame for his choices." Elaine scoffed, her voice dripping with disdain. "Oh, please. Hannah has always been weak, always playing the victim. It's time she took responsibility for her own failings." I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could, Hannah emerged from the kitchen, her eyes blazing with a fierce determination I had never seen before. "Enough, Elaine," she said, her voice steady and strong. "I am done letting you manipulate and control me. I am done letting you make excuses for Peter's behavior. This ends now." Elaine's eyes widened in surprise, clearly not expecting Hannah's newfound strength. "Hannah, be reasonable. We need to think about the family, about the children." Hannah shook her head, a small smile playing at the corners of her lips. "That's exactly what I'm doing, Elaine. I'm thinking about my children's well-being, about the kind of example I want to set for them. And that example is one of strength, of self-respect, of refusing to accept abuse and betrayal." I watched in awe as Hannah stood tall, her shoulders squared, and her head held high. She was no longer the broken, defeated woman she had been just months before, but a fierce warrior, ready to fight for her happiness and her family. Elaine's face twisted in anger, her manipulative facade crumbling before our eyes. "You ungrateful little bitch. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? By tearing this family apart." I stepped forward, placing a protective arm around Hannah's shoulders. "No, Elaine, you tore this family apart the moment you chose to enable and defend Peter's actions. You have no one to blame but yourself." Elaine's eyes darted between us, desperation and fury warring in her gaze. But as she looked at Hannah, at the unwavering strength and determination in her eyes, she seemed to deflate, her shoulders slumping in defeat. "Fine," she spat, turning on her heel and storming towards the door. "Have it your way. But don't come crying to me when you realize what a mistake you've made." As the door slammed behind her, I turned to Hannah, my heart swelling with pride and love. "I am so proud of you, sweetheart. You stood up for yourself, for your children. You showed her that she no longer has any power over you." Hannah smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "I couldn't have done it without you, Mom, without your love and support. You gave me the strength to keep fighting, even when I thought I had nothing left. I pulled her into a tight embrace, my own tears falling freely. That's what mothers do, Hannah. We fight for our children, no matter what. As we held each other close, I knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges and obstacles to overcome, wounds to heal, and trust to rebuild. But I also knew that Hannah was strong enough to face whatever lay ahead, that she had the love and support of her family to guide her through. And as I looked into my daughter's eyes, I saw a flicker of hope, a glimmer of the bright future that awaited her, a future free from pain and betrayal, filled with love, laughter, and the unbreakable bonds of family. Months had passed since Hannah's confrontation with Elaine, and life had slowly begun to settle into a new normal. With the help of Diane and me, Hannah had found a cozy new home for herself, Emily and Jason, far away from the painful memories of her old life with Peter. As I pulled up to Hannah's new house, I couldn't help but smile at the sight of Emily and Jason playing in the front yard, their laughter ringing out like music in the warm summer air. Hannah stood on the porch, watching them with a contented smile on her face, and I felt my heart swell with pride and love. "Grandma?" Emily and Jason shouted as I stepped out of the car, running to greet me with open arms. I scooped them up in a big hug, planting kisses on their cheeks. "Oh, how I've missed you two. Look at how big you've gotten." Hannah walked over to join us, her smile widening as she watched our joyful reunion. "They've been asking about you all week, Mom. They couldn't wait for your visit." I wrapped an arm around Hannah's shoulders, giving her a squeeze. "And I couldn't wait to see all of you. This new place looks wonderful, sweetheart. You've done an amazing job making it a home." As we walked inside, I marveled at the warmth and love that seemed to radiate from every corner of the house. Family photos lined the walls, and the air was filled with the delicious aroma of Hannah's cooking. We settled around the dinner table, passing dishes and sharing stories, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of deep contentment wash over me. This was what family was all about: love, laughter, and the unbreakable bonds that tied us together. As the evening wore on, Hannah put the children to bed and joined Diane and me in the living room, a peaceful smile on her face. "I never thought I could feel this happy again," she said softly. "After everything that happened with Peter and Elaine, I wasn't sure I'd ever find my way back to a place of joy and stability." Diane reached over and took Hannah's hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. "But you did, sweetheart. You found your strength, your resilience. You fought for your happiness, and look at where it's brought you." I nodded, my own eyes filling with tears. "Diane is right, Hannah. You've come so far, and I am so incredibly proud of you. You've shown your children what it means to be brave, to stand up for yourself and your happiness." Hannah smiled, her own tears spilling over. "I couldn't have done it without you both. Your love and support have meant everything to me. I don't know where I'd be without my family." As we sat there, basking in the warmth and love of our little family, I couldn't help but think back on the journey that had brought us to this moment. It had been a road filled with pain and heartache, with betrayal and loss. But through it all, we had held on to each other, drawing strength from the unbreakable bonds of family. Suddenly, the phone rang, breaking the peaceful silence. Hannah frowned as she glanced at the caller ID, her face growing pale. "It's Elaine," she said softly. I felt a flicker of anger and protectiveness surge through me, but Hannah just shook her head, a small smile playing at the corners of her lips. "You know what? I don't need to answer that. I don't owe her anything." With a decisive click, she silenced the phone and turned back to us, her eyes shining with a newfound strength and peace. "This is our fresh start, kids. We're going to be just fine." As I looked around at the faces of my loved ones, I knew that Hannah was right. We had each other, and that was all that mattered. The bonds of family had proven unbreakable, and together we could weather any storm that came our way. And as we sat there laughing and talking late into the night, I felt a sense of deep gratitude wash over me. We had emerged from the darkness stronger, wiser, and more united than ever before. And I knew, without a doubt, that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together as a family.